Hello everyone and welcome back to Beyond the Veil Tarot and Astrology. My name is Candice Marie. Thank you guys for joining me. Happy Sunday. Back at it with yet another video, and this week we're going to be taking a look at the astro weather for February 22nd through March the 1st, 2026. I'm going to take you guys through all of the daily transits, what's going on with the moon, and this video is going to be really touching on the up and coming Mercury retrograde in Pisces. Now, if you guys haven't seen me before and you're new, welcome. I'm a Western astrologer. I like to integrate the use of the Sabian symbols as well as tarot and use astrology to kind of make sense of what's going on in the cosmos. So if you're new here, make sure you guys subscribe to the channel, click that bell button below so you can see more of my videos. I'm here on Tuesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, and Sundays. And make sure you guys give me a thumbs up, share this video with other astro fans, and drop me a comment below and let me know how you guys are feeling with the energies this week. Follow me on X for more of my astro ramblings at BTV Astro. So a few quick love notes. Yes, drop your rising signs too. Let me know how you guys are feeling and what your rising sign is. I do read your comments. Thank you guys so much. If you guys haven't already seen it, the March 2026 horoscopes are out. They're long. Sorry guys, but there's a lot going on this month. So make sure you guys check that out as well. And we're in between eclipses. So we have got an eclipse coming up actually around the beginning of March next week. So if you guys missed me the last time I did eclipse readings for the solar eclipse, we're going to be posting the link for the live readings on Friday at 6 p.m. Central Time. That's 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern on my community tab. So that way you guys can get in line. You can ensure that you get a live reading to find out what the lunar eclipse in Virgo is doing in your chart. It's always fun on Friday, so come and hang out. It gets busy during the eclipses, man. How's everybody doing? Let's do a vibe check. Is everything starting to make sense, what I've been telling you for like the last month? I was telling you guys things were gonna start speeding up very quickly with a lot of weird world events, and I think that that's definitely taking place. We got alien stuff going on. We got all kinds of just heads that are rolling for leadership. It's about to get weird. So obviously being in between eclipses, that's part of it. But we are coming into the Mercury retrograde this week. And we are kind of gliding through Pisces season. So this week feels a little dreamy. Obviously there's some pretty intuitive transits that are kind of taking place. We're going to see the moon go through Taurus on Sunday. It'll be moving into the sign of Gemini early in the week where it's going to be a little bit more chatty. Then we're going to see it move into Cancer where we're going to see some really nice trines between the Cancer moon and also planets that are in Pisces. And then at the end of the week, it's moving into the bold and lovable sign of Leo. Now, the key energies this week are going to be including, if you're watching on Sunday, Venus trine Jupiter in Cancer. So two planets that are in their exaltation. Sunday is so lovey-dovey. I hope you guys are enjoying this energy and doing something sweet. And that'll be taking place around 2 p.m. Central Time on the 22nd today, Sunday. And this is bringing a lot of expansion, a lot of love, a lot of emotional abundance. And then we will see on the 26th, this is when Mercury is going to station retrograde. So we're already pre-shadow right now. You're probably already seeing all the weird kind of technical glitches, communication stuff, missing emails. So you can blame Mercury for that. It'll start its retrograde actually in the middle of the night here in Texas on the 26th. And then we are also going to be seeing Mars in Aquarius coming into a square with Uranus and Taurus on the 27th. Now the 27th and the 28th are explosive days. I'll get into it, but we know Mars brings the heat, it brings the passion. Uranus brings the surprises and the unexpected changes. And that'll be around 27 degrees. And then boom, Mercury retrograde starts the same day on the 27th in Pisces. I'm going to take you through all of that stuff. Mars will also be hitting the solar eclipse degree, guys. So I think that's really important. I haven't heard anybody else talking about this. I don't know why. I feel like a crazy person. But when planets come into conjunction or hard aspect with an eclipse, especially within weeks, we see kind of reverberation of the eclipse that just took place on the 17th, solar eclipse in Aquarius. So when it hits that degree, it's going to be bringing up some of the shocks, some of the surprises, some of the curveballs, and it's still in a square to Uranus and Taurus. And then, yeah, you know, it's going to definitely bring a little bit of disruption. I was kind of like cackling as I was going through social media this last week. I think it was like hours after the solar eclipse in Aquarius, we saw a bunch of like massive downs that were happening with a bunch of different like tech platforms, things that were going on with social media, things that were connected to communications, right? So it was the solar eclipse. Obviously, Aquarius deals with the future and anything that's technological, and that square to Uranus represents some of that kind of sudden, unexpected change. So we may see more of that. We may see some issues going on with communications and tech this week. Also, this is when we tend to see some issues going on either with the crypto markets. Obviously, Uranus is in Taurus, the sign that deals with money. Uranus is the future, so we can hear some shocking news in regards to crypto markets. And also the stock market is like lit up like a Christmas tree. So we are sandwiched right now between eclipses, right? So we're going to see that we had the solar eclipse February 17th in Aquarius. Now we are kind of the in-between week before we get to March 3rd, where we're going to be having a lunar eclipse that's going to be in Virgo. So South Node eclipse, lots of like clearing things out. Virgo dealing with health habits and work, lots of job changes for people. And it's really mirroring that cycle that started back in September of last year, where we saw a solar eclipse in Virgo at 29 degrees in opposition to Saturn and Neptune. So there's a lot of new beginnings that have been seeded in this last week. Lots of things going on with developments with AI, obviously. And then we're seeing, as we're getting into next week, major emotional kind of culmination peaks around Virgo themes. So health, service. I think a lot of it's going to be touching on discernment. And I'm expecting a lot of heightened sensitivity. Obviously, faded kind of karmic shifts take place during this period, a lot of closure. And I would just tell you guys, knowing that we're kind of in between eclipses and we're seeing Mercury turning retrograde, pump the brakes a little bit. Let's take a look at what happens with the Mercury retrograde, major launches, major decisions, everything we really need to rethink, think really into the details, and what we might be overlooking, but more importantly, how we feel. So these are going to be the big ones that I'm going to be touching on for you guys today, but I want to talk to you a little bit about the Mercury retrograde in Pisces. Now, I already kind of did a little bit of like a preview of this. We did kind of take Mercury into Pisces, and I took you all the way up until the Mercury retrograde point. So this is kind of my part 2 video. It'll take you all the way through the Mercury retrograde and let you guys know what you need to know. I might touch on it when it goes direct, but it's going to be a few weeks. But before I get into the weeds on this, there's something that I want to tell you guys. I think that number one, Mercury retrograde should not be feared, right? I always tell you it's kind of like cleaning out, you know, the claws that are cleaning out the fridge. We have to kind of get rid of the expired stuff. We have to kind of organize, clean up, and then everything is going to be a little bit more orderly and it's going to function better. I also think that since this is the first Mercury retrograde of 2026, I want to remind everyone that they're all going to be taking place in water signs. So this one is going to be kicking off this month in Pisces. We've got one in June that's going to be in Cancer. We've got another one that's going to be in the fall in Scorpio. So anytime we have Mercury, a planet that deals with mental related things, communications, anything that deals with intellect, information, media, retrograde, it's going to be more intuitive, it's going to be more emotional, it's going to be more sensitive, and we have to kind of get our emotions in check. Ruled by Jupiter, right? So Jupiter is the traditional ruler of Pisces, and Jupiter is retrograde right now, but right when we're coming out of the shadow, it's going to be direct, and we're going to see several trines between Mercury and Jupiter throughout this cycle. So there's a lot of positive things that are actually connected to this Mercury retrograde, very healing, very therapeutic. It's going to help us definitely connect a little bit better. And I think that this is probably going to be one of the better Mercury retrogrades all year. The fact that it's coming into connection with Venus, it's trining Jupiter. A lot of connections to planets that are in their exalted signs should actually bring us some hidden blessings. If you guys go into the future, you look at the one in Cancer over the summer, it's going to square Saturn, right? You look at the one that's going to happen in Scorpio in the fall, it's going to retrograde with Venus retrograde in Scorpio. So make the best of this one. This one is going to be, I think, quite a blessing in disguise. All right, so let's get into the details of this Mercury retrograde in Pisces. For the dates, okay, so February 26, 2026 to March 20th, 2026, the real astrological new year, the spring equinox, is when we will be seeing the Mercury retrograde taking place. Now, surprise, when I put my Mercury in Pisces video out, I did it before Mercury went into shadow. So if you guys are subscribing or watching the videos, you're able to kind of get your Mercury stuff in order before the Mercury retrograde. If not, no worries. I still think that this is a great one to work with, and there's going to be some good things that are going to come from that. Now, it will be in post shadow, which means even though the retrograde ends on March 20th, we will still have to see Mercury kind of wake up. It'll take a couple days to move forward, and then it'll continue to go through Pisces, and it will come out of the retrograde shadow on April the 9th. So it'll take that long to kind of make sense of what is going on in the skies. Now, it'll retrograde from 22 degrees of Pisces back to about 8 degrees of Pisces. And when it goes direct on the 20th, it'll be conjunct the North Node in Pisces. So there's a lot of fated, kind of destined things. There's going to be a lot of crazy dreams. I'm just telling you guys this now. Everybody's subconscious is going to be kind of swirling. And we're going to be definitely seeing some very interesting kind of aspects that are going to be going on throughout the retrograde. I want to read to you guys the degree where it's going to be starting its retrograde, okay? Just to give you a feel for what this is going to be about. And it's going to start its retrograde around that 22 degrees of Pisces. So you guys will get a kick out of this because in the last video I talked to you about 23, but in this one I'm going to talk to you about 22. And the 22 degrees of Pisces, the Sabian symbol is a man bringing down a new law from Sinai. Okay, so the more modern version is a prophet carrying tablets of the new law is walking down the slopes of Mount Sinai. So it might differ depending on what you guys look at. So the theme is higher authority. The symbol speaks to revelation and to the transcendental experience that brings insight and awareness of a higher authority. The image of a man bringing down a new law from Sinai or the mountain emphasizes spiritual and ethical rules of conduct. Although it alludes to Moses and the Ten Commandments, it can also refer to a mystical experience or spiritual quickening that transforms the way the individual lives his life. On a practical level, this degree can indicate a change in church doctrine, new public policies, or law, modernization of codes and procedures. At its highest, the symbol represents moral integrity, willingness to make personal sacrifices for the good of the whole, and a personal commitment to making positive difference in people's lives. Watch for arrogance and conceit or taking unfair advantage of others through position and privilege. Interesting. The accent is on ethics and moral integrity. You could experience internal conflict when considering your options today. Your greatest advantage lies in making sure that the means you take justifies the end result. Be honest, be truthful, be fair. Guard against thinking you can get away with misrepresenting the facts or taking unfair advantage of a situation or person. Taking the easy way out and breaking the rules or ignoring your responsibilities and obligations could result in unexpected consequences. Stepping stones is authority, decree, directive, order, ordinance, commandment, dictum, law, policy, legislation, proclamation, regulation, statute, spiritual experience, religious doctrine, moral integrity, and inspiration. I could say a lot about that. I mean, you know, Pisces is notorious for being connected to churches, spiritual places, organized religion, particularly anything that deals with like the Catholic or kind of like Christian faith. It also has a strong connection to like prophecy and anything that deals with, you know, kind of discussing religious scripture or kind of like prophesizing, you know, what may come, right? And there's a lot of that going on right now. Like I'm seeing a lot of that on social media. I think a lot of that's connected to the Saturn-Neptune conjunction as well, as a lot of people are kind of reevaluating or reassessing their relationship with a higher power or their belief system or who they are in terms of their role in, you know, like all of this. When I think about this particular Sabian symbol, I think that it really suggests that this retrograde is going to be inviting us to reevaluate our beliefs and kind of receiving intuitive downloads. It might mean that we're updating our personal laws around compassion, creativity, or surrender. And it's perfect for letting go of outdated illusions. I think that's like the positive in all of this. I think the other way of looking at this is that, you know, when Mercury goes retrograde, we start to uncover and we start to see what has been missing, what has been buried, what's been broken, what has not necessarily been functioning, and what needs to go. So as the Mercury retrograde happens, you're going to see that it's going to be probably a lot of redirecting the narrative with the media, right? Mercury is the media. It's also going to be a lot of things that are touching on news and information that are connected to things that have been concealed, because Mercury is going to bring it back up. Why? Because it's being influenced by Jupiter. And Jupiter deals with rules, law, it's about philosophy, it's also about education. Obviously sitting in the sign of Cancer, so it's more going to be, I think, about the origins of humanity, our roots, where we come from, and how there's potentially going to be some change with information or things that are going to be released or unsealed that can really have a really strong influence on immigration, things that are connected to homeownership, property rights, things that will impact families and communities. And also, I think, just get a lot of people very kind of like in their feelings. Now, in spite of that, some of the trines and things that we're going to see are actually pretty wonderful. I remember thinking back, and I was just talking to Mike from, the Peace Dealer, who I had a podcast with a couple years ago. I remember telling him, I was like, the North Node in Pisces, like, it's going to bring up all this stuff about aliens. And I had this theory that aliens were more connected to Neptune than Uranus. I didn't really think Uranus had a connection to aliens. I felt like, from my understanding and my research, and also talking to my mentor for a very long time, we've discussed a lot about other dimensions, and that there are only so many things that we can see. And so some people think it's ghosts, some people think it's aliens, some people think it's, potentially, interdimensional beings or ascended masters. But that aliens can be in different dimensions. And some people also are now starting to discuss whether or not these aliens are actually demons, and if this is something that's going on that's like spiritual warfare. I know a lot of this stuff sounds crazy, but this is the stuff that you're going to see people talking about while there is a Mercury retrograde in Pisces. Last year, we actually saw in the spring, Mercury and Venus went retrograde in Pisces. And so there was like this beginning of disclosure and talking about disclosure and whether or not there would be more information coming out about that. I also find it very interesting, on the day of the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, we're hearing more ramping up of presidents that are talking about UFO files and whether or not things are going to be disclosed. And I think that's part of kind of what's going on now. We're also going to see that while Mercury is retrograde, not only is it trining Jupiter, so it might be, impacting Homeland Security or things kind of connected to property or anything that deals with, values of homes. There's going to probably be some big changes regarding some of this stuff. So whether it's immigration laws, if it's going to be border laws, it could also be this rollback of people's kind of freedom when it comes to homes. So I'm kind of noticing there are states that are kind of moving forward with trying to kind of abolish property owners' taxes. And so I think we might see some more of that stuff that's going to happen. And big themes revolving around kind of Pisces places. So hospitals, prisons, foreign lands, the ocean, the sea, anything that's connected to other dimensions, and really touching on mental health or anything kind of connected to like psychedelics. We could see stuff that's kind of coming up with that as well, particularly because of Mercury's influence, I think, with like the South Node in Virgo. It's going to be a lot of kind of revealing things that could actually really help heal people. And that's because Mercury is going to trine Jupiter. So it's about, feeling safe and secure and longevity. And then it's going to come back into conjunction with the North Node. There is no synchronicities right now. Everything that's happening, in my opinion, is happening right on time. Just heard that Japan has created an artificial blood. I don't know if you guys heard about this. That's supposed to be like neutral, so it can be utilized for any different type of blood type. I think a lot of that's the Saturn-Neptune stuff too, because it's in Aries, which can be about blood. I'm also hearing, like studies of all these groundbreaking studies coming out about being like, we're curing diabetes, we're curing cancer. We just heard that the Prime Minister of Israel supposedly got diagnosed with having a blood cancer, and then within a matter of days was suddenly healed. Miraculous healing, right? Things that are like miracles, like literally Pisces is miracles, things that cannot be explained, that there are just suddenly these events that start happening that can actually be really good for humanity. Now, I'm not saying I'm for all of the things that I just mentioned, but I'm of the frame of mind that some of these things, whether it is innovations in health, whether it is solving some kind of, water crisis, whether it is things that, are manipulating the weather. Remember, Pisces is storm events and things that deal with flooding. Whether it's things that are also connected to breakthroughs and news connecting to pharmaceuticals, all of this stuff is going to start coming out, okay? And the trouble is that because Mercury is retrograde, we don't have all the facts yet, so we can't jump to conclusions. But I do think a lot of the things that are going to come out are going to make people feel very hopeful, and they're going to feel like, oh my God, this is amazing, it's a blessing. It may also be kind of feeding off of this Neptune energy now in Aries. So we've been experiencing the Saturn-Neptune conjunction over the last week. I'm just going to tell you guys, even though the conjunction is done, Neptune's going to retrograde over 0 degrees back and forth all year. So it's going to keep reactivating that. And every single solstice and equinox, when planets move into that 0 degrees of those signs, will oppose or square that degree point. So we won't really see until we get about 36 years down the road, when we get to come to the next Saturn-Neptune conjunction, just exactly what the real effects of this particular conjunction was. And just because we're out of it doesn't mean it's done. We're going to be feeling it very strongly for the next 2 months. Now, once again, my theory is that Neptune deals with aliens. So as Saturn and Neptune are coming into conjunction, this can suggest that now individuals are going, oh my God, what is real and what is fake? You know, what can I believe? And like, you know, how is this clashing maybe with what I've always believed in? People who never believed in God suddenly are believing in God. People who have always been super religious are now reevaluating their faith, and whether or not this kind of news of whether or not is life on other planets, does that now start to fracture some of their religious kind of beliefs and philosophies. So you see a lot of people who are debating about this, whether it's like, well, are aliens aliens? Are they good? Are they bad? You know, are they angels? Are they demons? And all of that stuff is getting kind of swirled in the ethers when we see this Mercury retrograde. I also think that it's also going to be really touching on where a lot of the stuff that comes out very fast, very quickly, Aries, is going to just totally stun people. And so there are going to be some people who are shocked about the news and the things that are coming out. But Saturn and Neptune can also represent where there are people who are like, well, I didn't see it on Fox News, or I didn't see it on MSNBC, so it must not be real, right? I didn't see it, so it's not there. Maybe people who are older who get angry or get agitated and they don't want to talk about it, or they don't want to acknowledge it, or they don't want to kind of integrate that into their sense of awareness. It can also represent where they recognize that it could stun people so much that they have to kind of slowly start to drip through the Mercury retrograde some of these truths. I've had a theory that the Saturn-Neptune is going to be a lot about distractions and keeping people distracted or keeping people divided so they don't see what's really going on. So is it potential that, you know, this talk of aliens is just so perfectly timed to distract from the Epstein files, maybe to distract from the looming threats of, you know, potential war with Iran? Is it trying to take away from some of the bigger scandals with people who are being arrested, you know, around the world? Maybe that's what I think. And so you'll see from now basically until April that there are some people who are completely oblivious to what's going on in the world, and they don't care, and they don't want to argue, and they don't want to hear the facts. And that will further isolate some people. And then there's going to be other people who are just slowly starting to wake up. One thing I've always loved about having a Mercury retrograde in my 12th house is that it's always changed my sleep habits. Sometimes I'll go through periods where when the retrograde happens, I'm sleeping in a little bit too late. I get too comfortable sleeping until like 9 or 9:30. The retrograde comes in, it gets me up in the morning. I get up, I'll sometimes, you know, like meditate. I'll catch up on some reading or some news, or I'll do things to kind of get into alignment and really focus on my habits. Other times, if I'm really run down, I'm working too much or whatever, it'll kind of adjust my sleep habits, and then I'll get periods of just having like really excellent slumber. And Pisces is also slow, it's feminine, it's receptive. So I think this retrograde is going to be a slow awakening for the collective to start to kind of recognize and realize what's happening. And Pisces represents what's going on in our subconscious, our dreams. That's why it's going to kick up a bunch of stuff. But it's also connected to what's going on in the world, right? Globally. This global surge of emotion, sensitivity, compassion. These are all the positive sides of Pisces. Or it's going to be people who are like losing their minds because they don't know how to kind of connect with people on an everyday level, because people have like this sense of like cognitive dissonance, and they don't recognize what's going on, and they can't really integrate with other people in a normal way. So try to be patient with people, I guess is what I'm getting at. Recognize that you can't quickly like wake people up. I was telling my husband the other day, I was like, when I was a kid, I used to sleepwalk. And I'm a Saturn Neptune person. And, you know, growing up, I would do it all the time. I would like walk around the house. I'd pick stuff up. My parents were like freaked out. I had to do like sleep studies and stuff. And it got me thinking about like the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, that if we try to wake everybody up too quickly, if we give them too much facts, too much information all at one time, you're going to have a mass amount of people who I think are just like catatonic. So there has to be this slow drip, drip, drip to start to kind of release some of this information. And then as we're getting into April, when the retrograde post-shadow subsides, then people are going to be like, well, now what do we do? Pisces, I think that connection to the Catholic Church, something I'm going to be watching is the Catholic Church going to start making announcements? Are we going to start seeing organized religious figures saying, okay, we need to prepare to start talking about this, you know, to our followers. We need to start preparing to, you know, make announcements and get ahead of this and start telling people that, oh yeah, there's going to be alien disclosure. And that's going to be a huge sign if we see that this is going to happen sooner. From what I understand over this last week, you know, one of the last presidents, Obama, came out and was like on a podcast, and they were asking him like, oh, are aliens real? And he's like, yeah, they're real, but I've never seen them. And then Trump kind of rebutted and was like, oh, that's classified information. Now we're going to be, you know, sending it off to a secretary who's going to be going and, you know, just declassifying all of like the, you know, UFO files, right? Which is something that's kind of gone back and forth for a very long time since, I mean, pre-Kennedy. But what got me thinking about in the past, when we have seen presidents that have tried to do this, we've seen, I can't remember which president it was, but one that was trying to get involved. You guys will probably know who it is. He had a heart attack and then Nixon took over. I can't remember which president it was. And then we also had JFK that was trying to get involved with, you know, creating NASA and then wanting to send people to the moon. And that still happened, you know, obviously, but he was assassinated. And so I was thinking like, wow, this is so crazy that we're seeing all these transits in Pisces. Now Trump is discussing about disclosure. I think that they're doing this because this is like the final card, and they're trying to do whatever they can to kind of scramble to either get ahead of what has been planned. Okay, so I keep referring to 2026 as a year crazier than 2022, at least in my opinion, to kind of scare the masses and like freak the masses out about, you know, some kind of potential you know, alien invasion. You're seeing movies that are getting ready to come out. Spielberg's getting ready to put out his disclosure movie, which I think is timely. I think there's another major alien kind of type movie that's coming out later this year too. Pisces is movies, guys, and it's screens. And so it's anything that's kind of connected to kind of getting the subconscious on board with fantasy land of all of the things that could happen. So inevitably down the road, when some of these things do happen, whether they're real or not, people will fear it. People will believe it. So recently I was posting on X, and it was just a thought that I had, but I was like, you know, for people who want to know what's going on, there's 3 things that you should be studying right now. Number 1, I would go and learn about Project Bluebeam, okay? And there was a lot of information that actually was released in the Epstein files where they were talking about the ability to kind of connect with people and communicate and influence people's thoughts, which is weird that that was in the Epstein files, okay? And the Project Bluebeam, without getting too far into it, it has been a plan for quite some time to be able to work with our atmosphere and being able to project things into the sky that may look like aliens or ships or other things that could be really scary. So it almost like seems like something out of, what is it? What's the Will Smith movie? I keep thinking, what is that movie? Anyway, you guys know what I'm talking about. Independence Day. So where you see like all the stuff going on with the ships and stuff at the White House. So, so people will think it's real, right? And I've seen articles where there has been like people in remote parts of like the world that are claiming that they're seeing Jesus in the sky, or they're seeing things in the sky, or they're hearing voices. So I wonder if this is part of it. Like, are they getting ahead of the narrative and trying to kind of prepare the population before some of this stuff takes place, so that way people aren't freaked out? And are they trying to kind of intervene from this happening? I know I sound crazy. Trust me, go and read about it. Number 2, I would go and I would learn about Project Looking Glass. This is something I've been reading about for years. Long story short, the government had a program where it was a super top secret. They were taking psychics. They were working with them to do remote viewing. They were basically placing them in this like chamber that had all of these things that were kind of swirling around it. And they had it set up where they could see and peer into the future. And they were able to have the psychics or the viewers be able to go through certain scenarios, and then they would tell them what they were seeing. So if they were like, oh, if we invaded this country, what would happen? If we did this, what would happen? And they were able to kind of see into the future. And at the end, they actually started shutting it down because they said they couldn't see beyond a certain time period. And I think it was like 2030. And the government shut it down. Everything was like super hyper classified. Like there was no more about it. But they were saying that what they were getting frustrated about is they couldn't see beyond a certain date, and that they kept getting the same response back from all of the various psychics that were sitting in there that were basically telling them like, yeah, you know, in the end, whoever or whatever is trying to intervene with human consciousness rising, or with people becoming free, or for people becoming free of illness or free of limitation or free of war, they could not stop what was coming. Okay, so in my mind, I'm like, of course, aliens, right? This is the last card that they have to play before like shit really starts to hit the fan. Anyway, really interesting stuff. I've been reading about it for years. Cannot recommend that enough. And I also posted something that Terrence McKenna was talking about, which I thought was brilliant. One of the last things that was posted from him is he was talking about going on a mushroom trip. And during his mushroom trip, the mushrooms were saying to him, well, yeah, like, you know, at the end of civilization, you're going to see just like chaos. You're going to see wars. You're going to see a bunch of issues with gender. You're going to see a bunch of things that are going to be coming up with weird mutations and pandemics. And you're going to be seeing lots of, you know, issues with international relationships. And he said, frankly, this is what it's like when a civilization is about to evolve and become one with the stars. Huh. Okay. And he said it's a fire in a madhouse. And I went, oh my God, Saturn, Neptune, fire in a madhouse, Aries, fire, Saturn, right? Fire, Neptune, institutions. So that we're in the fire in the madhouse phase. Some of us are already there, and we're trying to figure out why people just can't quite see what's going on. And like I said, I'm going to keep telling you guys, people are going to see it. They're going to see it here over the next couple of weeks and months. And when some of the worldly events really start to unravel during this Mercury retrograde period, and we get into April, then people are going to be like, what the heck has been going on? Especially when and if there is some kind of disclosure. It's less about the impact that that's going to have on us. Like, sure, will it make the markets freak out? Probably. And I think they're trying to keep that from happening. But I think that this has also been a plan to really scare people into a position similar to COVID of being like, oh, we need to have people that can be, you know, like protected. And like there is this whole discussion about creating a golden dome here in the United States to protect the United States. And they're saying it would be from any kind of influence that would be happening with extraterrestrials. But a lot of the government contracts that are going on with some of this stuff is highly, highly, highly tied to big tech. So we've got tons of things that are flying around, you know, in our airspace and also just around the planet that in theory would be set up to protect us. But my concern is it actually being set up to spy on us? Is it being set up to control us? Is there a grid that's being set up? Similar to 2020, you have to create the crisis in order to provide the solution. Now, wherever you stand on that does not matter to me. I know from what I've seen with what's come out with the documents and the discussions about talking about COVID in, you know, 2015, 2016, is enough for me to be like, oh, okay, so clearly a lot of this stuff was planned. I have this strange feeling that they're starting to pump some of this stuff out because they know it's going to freak people out. They know it could disrupt the markets. They know it's also a really easy in to be able to set up a surveillance state. So watch what happens during this Mercury retrograde. Watch what information is unveiled. Particularly, I'm interested in when Mercury goes direct, it's going to be right around 8 degrees. So it's going to be conjunct the North Node. So we're going to hear a lot more about what's going on with consciousness. Just this last week, they were saying, you know, there's all this news coming out about, oh, we're realizing that there's consciousness within ourselves and that, you know, the universe is not just something that is erratic. It actually corresponds and responds to us. And what we are kind of putting out on a cellular level that has an impact on what's going on in, you know, the universe. And it's having like a reaction to us, and that the future is not defined. It's affected by our frequency, by our emotions, by our vibration. We're also, unfortunately, I guess in this last week, we just saw that there was another, like, I think it was like it was a scientist, but I think he was like an astrophysicist who was studying black holes. And they were studying black holes, which is very, very dangerous, obviously, who was killed in California. There was another one that was killed, I think, recently at the end of 2025. I think that was in the East Coast. And all of these scientists were studying the same thing. They were studying physics, they were studying black holes, they were studying nuclear fusion, all kinds of things that would potentially generate energy that would be free. Is it possible that some of the things that are being held back right now are being held back because it would create free energy, because it would free people, because it would allow people to come out of poverty and be able to like really evolve? Who has those documents? Why is the government not in control of it? Why are we not getting the disclosure? Why did those things happen to JFK? And is it potentially like really dangerous that, you know, Trump is kind of putting himself in a position of being like, yeah, we're going to put it out there. Now, we've heard this a lot from this administration. I'll be super critical on that, where they tell us they're going to put something out and then we kind of get like a very small fraction and lots of things that have been obviously redacted that we cannot see. There may be more of that. I mean, when Mercury goes direct, and actually Mercury and Mars will conjunct around 10 degrees of Pisces, it's going to be right on Bondi's Saturn. So I do think she's going to play a huge role in this. We know that women, you know, in positions of power or government, because Neptune is influencing this, is a huge theme, and what has been concealed or their involvement in that concealment. We will also hear a lot more about journalists, and this was another ding that I got, so I'm going to take my credit where my credit's due. I remember saying to you guys during the Mercury video in Pisces a few like a week or two ago, I said, watch for a journalist that goes missing, or watch for some kind of international journalist scandal, or a journalist that gets killed. Okay, in the last week, Tucker Carlson got held in Israel and was basically put in a room where he was questioned and was not able to leave. Okay, I don't know what's going on now, but I was like, holy smokes, wrong person to try to detain, because that guy is just going to make content about it forever, but okay, whatever. But that's another kind of thing. So I'm wondering, okay, are we going to hear quite the story from Tucker Carlson about him being detained in a foreign country and all of that stuff? So there's going to be a lot of things tied to Epstein, Bondi, possibly more journalists that are exposing things regarding journalists going missing, all of that stuff. So watch for it. Now, it's going to be at 22 degrees that it's going to start the retrograde. And we know that in degree theory, that is that kind of dangerous degree, right? The kill or be killed degree. But this is really symbolizing that energy of Capricorn, which is about hard, long-standing rules, regulations, people in positions of power, things that are kind of connected to government documents, government kind of directives. And as we see it come into that 22 degrees, it's going to symbolize a major transformation. So it could mean endings or tests of structure as well as authority. That means that it's going to really indicate where old systems are beginning to crumble, and it's doing that to make way for new systems and for new levels of like maturity and responsibility. So it really, I think it's kind of like a call to kill some of the issues that have been concealed, to kill some of the things that have been escapist habits, things that are kind of like foggy in terms of thinking. It's about building more, I think, resilient spiritual foundations. And I'm expecting that we're going to see some breakthroughs in healing addictions, healing boundaries or victimhood and victim mentality. It's been interesting just to see some of the stuff that's going on social media. I mean, Pisces does deal with alcohol, you know, and now Saturn and Neptune are going into Aries, and we're hearing that younger generations are even less and less likely to drink than people my age and older. So I think we're going to hear maybe some groundbreaking studies in regards to alcohol usage and like drugs and things like that, and how it's impacting us. Maybe a lot of people are choosing to quit drinking or quit drugging. I think that's definitely a really good time to do it. And Pisces can be about hypnosis. It can also be about meditation or therapy. So if you're somebody who's struggling with addictions, or if you're having a hard time letting go of things, or if you're, you know, having a difficult time kind of coping, anything that's going to be kind of healing and therapeutic or dealing with the healing arts can be really, really, really beneficial at this time to be able to kind of kill off what has been something that's been kind of hanging around for a long time. Now, this Mercury retrograde is going to be impacting people who are ruled by Mercury. So my Geminis and my Virgos, you guys are going to be impacted, as well as my Pisces risings. Really, anybody who has anything that is mutable from 7 to 23 degrees. So obviously Gemini, Virgo, Sag, and Pisces, you guys are going to be feeling the effects of this. Mercury retrogrades are nothing new. I feel like they are kind of like looked at or like kind of like demonized, but we have generally 3, sometimes 4 of them a year. They last for about 3 weeks. Basically, Mercury, when it goes retrograde, all planets except for the sun and the moon go retrograde. Okay, we just don't see them as frequently as a Mercury retrograde. When Mercury is going retrograde, it's almost like an optical illusion where Mercury appears to be moving backwards. And so really what it symbolizes is that internal review. So it's prompting us to review, reflect, rework, revise, right? Reassess, return. And in the realm of Pisces, you know, like I keep telling people, dream journals, therapy, meditation, you know, we're going to have to do a lot of this stuff for like the next month or so, especially just to kind of protect our vibes, because Pisces is like a sponge. So we can like absorb things emotionally from a lot of people and take a lot of it on. And we will find that it's going to impact communication, travel, and tech. You know, how does it affect us? Well, for about 3 weeks, and then you've also got about a week or two on each side with the pre and the post shadow that will feel the effects of it. So when Mercury retrogrades, it's kind of like slowing down our external kind of processes. So we'll see that there's miscommunications, missing emails, cars break down, travel gets delayed. There's old issues that come up that need to be resolved. So think things like tech glitches, travel issues, exes resurfacing for certain people. Yeah, you guys are going to feel that. But Mercury traditionally rules communication. So computers, laptops, phones, anything that is a gadget. It's also connected to intellect, how we think, how we write, you know, how we text, how we email, short trips, siblings, contracts, and our daily routines. Now, I've said this before, and there were some Mercury and Pisces people that got kind of pissed off. So I'm sorry, but I don't make the astrology rules. But Mercury is debilitated in Pisces. Certain planets perform better in certain signs. In order to have a divinatory practice, you have to have a system. You have to stay within those guardrails. So it tells us that when Mercury is in this sign, it's weakened. That's traditionally what it means. So in Pisces, this is a sign where it's in its fall, which means it's not able to perform as well as it does in Gemini or in Virgo, where it's more logical, kind of detail-oriented. When Mercury's in Pisces, it is not playing with home field advantage, right? And so that's something just to kind of think about. It's almost kind of drowning sometimes in the emotional, intuitive waters. And that's not a bad thing if you have Mercury in Pisces. You might be more poetic, in touch, in tune, the ability to read people without communicating. There are certainly pros and cons to every placement. But when we have Mercury that is debilitated and then we have Mercury that is retrograde, we're already working with two difficult kind of energies. So it leads to this feeling of things being a little fuzzy when we're thinking. We can't see clearly. We're kind of like blinking our eyes and things seem kind of like scrambled. And we will choose Piscean themes. So we'll choose idealism over facts. We'll choose emotions over logic. And it can really heighten our imagination, but it can also bring up a great deal of deception. Now, the North Node is also in Pisces. That doesn't mean it's bad, but I kind of see the North Node as something that can kind of distract us. So, you know, the South Node is like usually what we're willing to kind of let go, what we don't need, or what we kind of fall into naturally. But the North Node, even though you hear Western astrologers say, oh, this is your Dharma, that's what you go towards, it's going to give you everything. It's usually what we're afraid of. We don't know how to do it. We don't know how to overcome it. And it's something that is very distracting. So seeing like the South Node ruler going retrograde closer to the North Node means that we can actually be super caught up and consumed with the past, right? Now, in mundane astrology, Pisces rules hospitals, right? Private spaces, prisons, secrets, spirituality, oceans, drugs, escapism, collective compassion, yada, yada, yada. And it's really building off of this Jupiter energy because Jupiter is influencing this. And so the reason why I've said it's really much connected, I think, to human origins and our roots, our genes, where we come from, is because that's what Jupiter in Cancer generally kind of talks about. We all saw that recent kind of famous ad that Sweeney did, you know, where she was like, my genes, and everybody was in an uproar. And I was like, it's pretty common when Jupiter is in Cancer. We always see really big commercials for genes. It's not always genetics, but, you know, that's what they were kind of playing on. I think that with Jupiter's influence, it's interesting because Jupiter's the dispositor. So we've got at least Jupiter that is kind of speaking to Mercury and being like, hey, dude, you got to reflect on the past, or you got to check in with your emotions, or you have to remember where you came from. And what Pisces is like, well, we came from the stars. I just saw an article recently, and it was saying that they recovered like a meteorite that they analyzed, and they found strands of DNA that was human on the meteorite. And I was like, wow, okay, it's happening. Like, you know, we're going to start to potentially really start to see where science and religion are really coming head to head, where we've been told this story for so long that, you know, we were created, and I think we were, But I think that personally, the Bible, it can be quite figurative. I'm not saying it's wrong, but it can almost be kind of, in a way, very poetic, and it's telling the story without not really telling it directly. And a lot of that's just how long has kind of gone on since it's been kind of originally written and then translated. And we see pastors and preachers, and we see, priests that are always interpreting, I guess, like doctrine and scripture. And so now I think we're going to start to get some information that's going to be like, okay, how do we alert the masses about this stuff? And like, what are these organized religions going to say? And like, how is it going to test their kind of authority? And that's a bit of an issue because for thousands of years, religion has been used intentionally to be able to control the masses. Now, I'm not saying that they didn't have good reason or intent to begin with. Maybe they did. Not all of them mean bad, but it has been a means to kind of say to everybody, okay, you know what? You have to do this thing. You have to ask for forgiveness. You have to be a good person. You have to, put some money in the donation plate. And if you do that, then I'll give you access to God. But now Saturn and Neptune is in Aries. So that means individuals are going to be waking up. And yes, you're going to see some of the tech billionaires and some of these psychos with like Palantir being like, I'm going to play God, and then you're going to see other people who are going to be like, wait a second, I can connect with God. I don't have to belong to an organized religion. God can be within me. Like I can be sovereign and I can also still serve. And so that's going to be pretty disruptive, I think, for the church. That's going to be very disruptive also for a lot of nations that are heavily founded on their kind of religious beliefs. And then you'll see others that are going to be super focused on being like, nope, we're not going to acknowledge it because we want to instill the rule of law. And we also want to instill and make sure that we're still going to have, a God-fearing kind of nation. So we'll see some divide on that. With Jupiter, being retrograde and the dispositor of the Mercury retrograde, this is emphasizing also internal growth and home, family, and emotional security. So Jupiter influence will amplify the themes of nurturing, intuition, but it does warn against over-emotional decisions or family secrets that are going to start resurfacing. Mercury also is tied to that South Node, like I said, in Virgo. So watching the South Node ruler come into conjunction with the North Node, you're going to have a lot of people wanting to dig up things from the past or wanting to get information about, well, what is going on with these job numbers? Why are there so many layoffs? Like what's taking place? Like what's going to happen? And it's going to kind of continue because we're going to still see eclipses in Virgo. We're going to still see retrogrades that are going to be influenced by the South Node in Virgo. And this is also highlighting where we have a tendency to be too much of a perfectionist, where there's too much overanalysis, maybe service-based burnout. And so there's this kind of karmic detox that's going on from critical habits, pushing us towards kind of Pisces flow and acceptance. And I think you're going to see a lot of people who are going to be like, I'm tired, Grandpa, and literally just feel like they need a break. And I would say sleep, rest, pace yourself, because I think things are going to be a lot quicker in about 6 weeks' time. So if you need that time to kind of rest and reflect and meditate, like don't burn yourself out. Overall, the themes of the retrograde, I think in a nutshell, if I had to, make it one sentence, it would be illusion versus reality. That's what this is going to be about. What is being projected? Is that my reality? Is that healthy for me? Great for spiritual healing, great for working with creative blocks, great for uncovering why there's been some emotional miscommunication. Pisces wants forgiveness. And it wants to also dissolve boundaries, okay? And so I think there's going to be an even bigger need to kind of step up our game when it comes to really maintaining those boundaries and not feeling like we are, in the fire in the mental institution. Because I've noticed when there's eclipses in Pisces, when there's retrograde in Pisces, people are just nuts. They're out to lunch. They're not paying attention when they're driving. They're walking around, running into people. People are kind of getting lost. And that's very much a Pisces energy. Maybe it's been more so recently because we've had Saturn and Neptune in Pisces, but it's been wild. Now, this will be a time where some people will revisit dreams. You'll have reoccurring dreams, or you'll be having past life flashbacks. That's very much Pisces. I've noticed I've had a series of dreams where I'm like, I haven't had a dream of being in this space that's very familiar to me in years, but I remembered it after waking up. And I'm like, where was I? I know I've been there before. It can also bring a return of issues with mental habits and also addiction. And for sure, it's going to be about kind of revealing some of these hidden truths. So how do you prepare for this? How do you navigate this retrograde? Don't go into it with fear. Go into it knowing that even if nothing happens or there isn't anything that gets delayed or stalled, there is this kind of upgrade that's kind of happening in our subconscious when we're sleeping. Obviously, back up your data before we see the Mercury retrograde. Double check your travel plans. Maybe avoid signing contracts. Wait till Mercury goes direct, because when it does, it's going to come into conjunction with the North Node. So it's going to feel like the destined time. And then it's going to come back into a trine with Jupiter. definitely reflect on your past patterns, journal intuitively, take time to meditate, and maybe embrace some of the delays that are going to come with some kind of like divine kind of like redirection. So predictions that I have, I've already given you guys quite a few of them, but obviously increased misinformation in media, that's a biggie. Cyber glitches, I think we're going to see ocean-related events, particularly like Navy-related events or things that are going on with shipping and trade routes. We could see floods and oil spills, mass spiritual awakening, scandals in regards to pharma or private sector, compassionate global movements, but watch for a lot of deception in politics, and also some opportunities for artistic breakthroughs. I think that could be a big one. I'm filming this actually on Friday before you guys get this on Sunday. And so I had said last week that part of what was going on with the transits through Pisces is that we were going to see some changes going on with economic policy and trade. International trade has a huge tie to Pisces, but it's also influenced by Jupiter. So with Jupiter retrograde, some nations are reflecting on, how they want to trade, how they can kind of boost growth within their own economies, and how they're going to be kind of changing the agreements, because Venus and Mercury are going through Pisces together. And if they're going to be rethinking their agreements, and that could be tariffs, that could be all kinds of stuff. And so we saw the big, decision that was made by the Supreme Court, where they ruled against Trump's tariffs. They basically said to him that it was worded wrong, which made me chuckle because that's such a Mercury and Pisces thing. They were kind of speaking between the lines. And the media is painting it as something that is very positive, at least for certain parties. And what's interesting is that his rebuttal, because he literally came back on Friday, and his rebuttal was, well, the justices explained to me I couldn't, do it this way. It had to be reworded, and they told him that he could only do it in like an emergency situation, and for him to change the policies with the tariffs, he would actually have to add more. So what did he do? He added 10% onto the tariffs. He's holding on to the tariffs. Now tariffs are going to go up. Why does this matter? Why should you care? Well, I'm not politicking, because honestly, I don't really care. I care more about the fact that this retrograde is going to come into conjunction with Venus. So that means that there's about to be a reorganization of international order and trade and agreements. And honestly, knowing Trump's demeanor, they might flip-flop several times. Who knows what they're going to do? But there is definitely a reworking of the strategy of how they're going to be shipping and receiving and trading that's influenced by Jupiter. Jupiter is about international trade, and how that's impacting the economies at home in the country you live in. You see, what you don't understand is that once we start doing things like having to give back the billions of dollars that came from these particular, tariffs, then the United States is going to have even less money to be able to fund some of the changes they're trying to make. So why you would be against that, I don't know. Yes, it's going to make the stuff that you buy off of Amazon cheaper, right? But is that going to actually help people who are trying to run businesses in America? Is that actually going to help go and build warehouses and processing centers and all kinds of things where people could become more self-sufficient at home? Probably not, because everybody's buying cheap stuff from other countries. So yes, on the surface level, people are going, well, it's going to make things cheaper. But the truth is that what's being done right now is being strategized to bring more money into certain countries to be able to help the citizens, Jupiter and Cancer, to be able to bring more wealth and equality at home. Knowing that Venus is trining Jupiter now, and that Mercury is getting ready to go retrograde and it'll trine Jupiter again, makes me feel like there's going to be a back and forth, and eventually, they're going to make some decisions that are, yes, going to have some really big effects on individuals, especially April, May, June of this year, when they start to see that, okay, well, maybe I'm getting money back in my pocket, right? Trump was alluding, and whether or not he does it or not, once again, don't care. But he was alluding to being like, yeah, we're going to give out, basically like tariff, refunds. We're bringing in money from the tariffs, from the trade deals. We're giving it back to Americans. It may actually stimulate people feeling like, wow, I can buy groceries. I can afford my rent. I can, save money for a down payment. I can move my family into a bigger place. That's what the astrology is saying. That's not my politics. We won't know the effects of it until closer to June or July, when Mercury is coming into this particular area. But there's two sides to it. And I think that anytime we've seen, retrogrades that are going on, so we had one in the fall that was like in Scorpio, and we saw the big tariff spat, and then the stock market went haywire. We saw stuff that was going on last spring during the Mercury and the Venus retrograde in Pisces, and it was the same stuff. So this is nothing new. It just happens to have much, much, much better aspects, and I think much better effects down the road. Now, I want to show you guys some of the important transits that we're going to be seeing during the Mercury retrograde that will be taking place. And obviously, it's going to start on the 25th, and that'll be later in the day. Mercury will turn retrograde at 22 degrees. So this is the day that everything starts to change. I think it's right late at night. Yeah, so it's like right around the end of the 25th going into the 26th. So it starts the retrograde at 22 degrees, and you'll see 2 days later, the moon's going to hit Jupiter and it's going to trine this. So basically, you know, when Mercury stations here, it's going to intensify some of the confusion and the introspection. Yes, it can stall decisions, right? And it can create a lot of vivid dreams. I would say watch for misunderstandings and kind of missing pieces to the puzzle, and try to focus on that inner wisdom. And then on the 27th, you're going to see that Mercury is going to come into conjunction with Venus. And I'm very interested on this day, because when Mercury and Venus conjunct at 22 degrees, right, benefic, the moon is trining. So this is saying there's going to be some reworking of economic policies, 22, or something that deals with leadership, female leadership. There's a reason why you're hearing a bunch of people stepping down too, resigning, stepping down, going into hiding, like all these people that are now missing. It's connected to this. So I think we heard that Ursula from the I think it was from the EU, she's supposedly stepping down, or she's kind of connected to the European Bank or something. I don't know. But that could be some connection there. So watch for a female journalist, a female who is in positions of power, leadership, somebody who goes into hiding, or somebody who goes missing, or they step down. And obviously we've got a bit of like a sticky situation here, because Mercury is the mind, Venus is the heart, okay? Venus in Pisces is so good, so yummy. And when Mercury is retrograde in, in Pisces, conjunct Venus, yes, a lot of you guys are going to be like, I heard from my ex, I had a dream about my ex, I ran into my ex, yes. And like, people who you haven't seen in a very long time, or people who you haven't, spoken to in a very long time might kind of come out of the woodwork. This blends the mental review retrograde with love and values. So the positive is that there can be romantic reconciliations. There could be opportunities for a second go at things. Going back to creative projects, feeling more inspired, but keep in mind, there's still a lot of fogginess revolving around affection. So, a lot of sweet words, right? Mercury and Venus and Pisces, somebody who's like pouring their heart out to you, like, I want to make it work, let's get together, and they call you because they're drunk, or you have that reconnection and then they vanish, right? So I've seen that a lot with people, who have been kind of going through these transits. They're like, why did they tell me all these things and then they're gone? I'm like, dude, you're going through a Mercury, Neptune transit, or you've got, transit Mercury retrograde on your Venus or something like that. And that's what I tend to kind of see. It can also mean that it's ideal for artistic revisions. Just watch for kind of like idealized illusions in relationships. And I think this is also idealizing things with what people are buying. There could be some like leak or something that's connected to financial data. There could also be some leaks, or, people kind of hyping up things about some of these up and coming movies, Pisces. And then things are quiet for a little bit. We don't really see anything going on until we get closer to the Cazimi, which is going to happen around the 7th. And on the 7th, when we have the Cazimi, it looks like it's going to be at 16 degrees. Let's go back. There we go. So really early in the morning on the 7th, you might be able to catch it if you get up early in the morning. And this is also at a Cancer degree. And it's starting to come into a trine with Jupiter. So that's going to be implying some of the positive things that are going to be manifesting, especially in later in March when Jupiter goes direct. So the Cazimi is the halfway point between the retrograde. So if you're like, what the heck is the purpose? What am I supposed to be doing? Why are things so chaotic? The sun coming into conjunction with Mercury in this fashion with the retrograde Mercury means that Mercury is being purified in the heart of the sun. So emotional purification, detoxification, crying, sure, tears, reviewing old letters or text messages or photos, feeling very sentimental, I think is kind of a theme with this. And obviously it's starting to come into a trine here with Jupiter. Look at this, at the same time that this is happening, Venus is coming into conjunction with Saturn and Neptune. I think a lot of people are going to be persuaded to get on board with something that they've watched, or something that they have viewed, or something they've seen. And there's going to be something falsified about money, about a financial situation. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors and a lot of distraction with what's going on around the 7th, unfortunately. But that Cazimi is being reborn. So This is about clarity coming through in bursts of information amid what feels kind of like chaos, intuitive insight. So it's great for epiphanies, but it can be overwhelming for your emotions. And when that happens at 16 degrees of Pisces, that would be 17 if we round up. And that is an Easter promenade celebration. Okay, well, it's a little early because Easter's not for about another month. And the theme is standing out. So this symbol speaks to magnification of self in a very contemptuous way, very highly individual way. The image of an Easter promenade is especially a dramatic representation of individual self-expression and alludes to vanity and extremes an individual will go to in order to draw attention. Easter symbolizes a time of rebirth and regeneration. Here it signifies self-renewal, an attempt to present itself in a new light or share new or herefore unveiled facets of the self with others. On a practical level, the symbol refers to those situations in which there is an urge to demonstrate some newly acquired skill or progress made and win the admiration of others, perhaps in a musical recital, craft, flower, or art show or public contest. At its highest, it represents admirable and inspiring dedication to self-improvement. But watch for self-display of attention and attention-getting behavior. The accent is on individuality. People may take unusual steps to gain attention. Your greatest advantage lies in knowing how to showcase your talents. Make sure you're prepared for all contingencies. Appearances will count. Guard against making a fool of yourself in your efforts to stand out from the crowd. Avoid extremes in dress and behavior. Okay. So being that this is going to be connected to the South Node through rulership, and it's trining Jupiter, I think that we're probably just going to see like there are some big announcements that can kind of be like a flop, or things that people are pitching or promoting or trying to sell you on or trying to convince you to buy. It's like it may not be what it seems, and I'm really looking at that Venus-Neptune conjunction and the Venus-Saturn conjunction too. Wow. I mean, the Mercury retrograde, you know, I think about like all the stuff, like Deepak Chopra was all over the Epstein files. I don't know if you guys know that, thousands of emails. And so like all across the spiritual community, people are like, how did we not see this? How did we not know? And they're talking about discernment and being careful to kind of give too much to idols and people that you worship, right? Pisces is we worship at the feet. That's the reason why, you know, Jesus would have, you know, his feet cleaned, you know, with oils and like women's hair and stuff. They saw it as a form of love and sacrifice and like worshiping that person, showing them love. So when you think about this, I think it's going to probably be some more exposures about people and people being like, how did I buy into this? How did I believe this person? And it could be a big expose on a pastor or a religious figure or somebody like the Pope. It could be a woman that is, you know, being connected or somehow like aligned with some of these things that have been kind of going on with all of these conspiracies. I think that for us, it's going to represent this emotional download, and that we have this memory of who we are, where we come from, what we've been through. And it's really a really potent moment for healing and practicing forgiveness, because part of doing that is like forgiving yourself, right? Not carrying around that dead weight. And so you might start looking around being like, well, why am I carrying, you know, this weight? Or why do I have this grudge that I'm holding on to? Like, I just want to set it free. And so there can be a major emotional shift that can kind of happen right around that time. Then on the 8th, we're going to see Mercury come into a trine with Jupiter, which is great. Mercury is news, Jupiter is expansion. So, you know, somebody's going to be like, oh, there's this thing that we're doing and it's going to be great. And I'm going to be like, let's see if it actually happens. You know, it sounds like a good idea, or maybe it's not totally thought out. Mercury in Pisces to me is kind of like half-baked. It's like, wouldn't it be great if we could do this? You know, like that daydream aspect of something. But is it actually going to work? Is it going to be real? And, you know, can it actually cause expansion? Can it bring wealth? Can it bring stability? I don't know. I still think that Mercury trine Jupiter is good, especially when you're dealing with an exalted Jupiter. So it'll give us the opportunity to maybe get clarity on the 7th. On the 8th, this is a lot of expansive kind of mental flow. And it means that we're going to be more optimistic with the things that we're reflecting on. Very 6 of Cups energy. So, you know, family healing, reconnection, spiritual growth, ease of frustrations during the Mercury retrograde. We're kind of making peace with something and maybe spending more time with our families, or maybe some people are returning back to spiritual practice or returning back to reading scripture or going to church. It's just about not over-promising. Mercury trine Jupiter can be notorious for being like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And I'm going to be like, okay, yeah, but let's see it actually really happen. On this day, we have a grand water trine. Look at that. The moon's going to be in Scorpio, trining Jupiter, trining the sun. So it's some really good aspects, but these are all moksha houses. So it's also about like liberation of the soul, like releasing things and letting things go for our evolution. All right, and then this is where things get really interesting. So then it takes us to the 15th, and this is one of the days that I'm like, I'm not crazy about this aspect. Mercury's going to come into conjunction with Mars. Come on. There we go. At 10 degrees. What is that? A Capricorn degree. So this is another one that's dealing with long-standing issues, governments, communication, contracts. This is the day that Mercury and Mars will be right on top of Bondi's Saturn. So for those of you guys who are like, where is the accountability? Where is the clarity? Where is the rest of the documents? Is she going to resign? What's going on? Pay attention to that day. Something will probably be going on in regards to her. Give or take a day or two, because the moon's going to swing through there too. So when Mercury is retrograde conjunct Mars, which by the way is a malefic, and Mars is now the dispositor of Saturn, Neptune, and Venus, I am predicting that there's probably going to be some news about some potential war. Unfortunately, it means that it may not be real. I have a feeling that there could be some things that are going on that are real, but if they try to pump enough media and enough news, or if they try to convince enough people that, oh, there's, a bomb that was dropped here, or this strike happened there, and they can circulate enough videos, they can create enough public kind of like chaos to have people like freak out and be like, oh my God, what do we do? Because Mercury's retrograde scrambled. And it gets worried when it's in Pisces, and that conjunction to Mars is highlighting the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. That's like, am I seeing this right? Is this real? Discernment, friends, discernment, discernment, be careful. Don't jump to conclusions. No knee-jerk reactions, right? Of Mercury, I gotta sell this, I gotta buy this, I gotta get on a plane, I gotta go somewhere, I gotta end it. And honestly, because Mercury retrograde is about mental health, I really have some concerns about the Mercury retrograde conjunct Mars. I think unfortunately, we're gonna see mid-March that there is gonna be a lot of hysteria. There's gonna be a lot of things shifting for people, and like not everybody is handling some of the disclosure very well. And there's also a lot of people who are not dealing well mentally with just the sheer amount of information that's coming out, and like they can't handle it. And like the frequencies, if you guys have been looking at the Schumann resonance, is just going through the roof. There's just massive spikes of where we're seeing things that are all white. We are going through the Great Awakening. Everybody's going to go through that process very differently. So Mercury comes into conjunction with Mars at 10 degrees. This is merging thoughts with actions. This is a day, and I would say the 15th, 16th, 17th, to tune the world out, right? Go and take a long hot bath, go walk by the beach, listen to some music, meditate, do some kind of spiritual practice, take time and use discernment, because whatever is going on, I think is going to freak a lot of people out and convince people that we're under attack. And whether it is aliens, which probably not yet, or if it is something that is connected to, some global event, or war, I would say, let's make sure that it's real, right? Now that's going to be happening at 10 and change of Pisces. And this is important because all the degrees are going to tell us something. So that'll be 11. Men seeking illumination. The keyword is dedication. The seekers on the path. The symbol speaks to the initiation of discipleship and an apostolic succession, the transmission of spiritual authority and specific mission in one unbroken line. The image of men seeking illumination refers to all seekers on the spiritual path, and it alludes to willingness to assume responsibility and endure the hardships and discipline demanded of those who wish to achieve conscious immortality. Just as the divine spirit is dependent upon itself to sustain its existence, its hearts of men and individuals must nurture and develop their own spiritual potential if they hope to survive. At its highest, the symbol represents mystical awakening, devotion, and commitment to preserving the spiritual integrity of life in whatever form it is found. The negative is pretense or false claims of spiritual merit and enlightenment. The accent is on aspiration. It becomes obvious to accomplishing higher tasks requires hard work and self-discipline. The focus is on the desire to know. Your greatest advantage lies in keeping your eye on your goal and your shoulder onto the wheel. Keep your motives pure and your hands clean.
Guard against false prophets and others who claim to have inside track with higher powers. Wow. Just men seeking illumination, seekers of the path. Discipleship. Things are kind of getting biblical, even for me. I don't know. I think that, I think about a couple months ago, I think it was last year, they were talking about how there was like this discussion about all of these various kind of like religious leaders meeting at Mount Sinai and like discussing about, coming together and trying to like merge religions. That's what this reminds me of, like the other Sabian symbol. I know there's also been this huge talk about here in the United States about, Trump trying to bring back prayer and like protecting prayer in schools. Mercury could be children and anything that deals with, communication and learning. Pisces can be religious nature. Mars might indicate that there are some people who are for it and there's a lot of people who are going to be fighting back against it. Once again, neutral on this. I think church and state should be separate personally, but I also feel like we're kind of at a day and age where there's a lot of other people who are being protected. Like you're seeing a lot of like immigrants and like some of their cultural beliefs. I mean, we're seeing videos out of New York City where you're seeing on loudspeakers in Brooklyn, 4 or 5 times a day, like Muslim calls to prayer. So if that's okay, and if that's being protected, then why is it that why can't Christians pray in school? I feel like there is definitely going to be some reworking of some of the stuff that's going to be coming up. And I'm not saying I'm for either one of those things, but it's not like it has to be for select groups of people. Now, this is also all the retrograde energy is just like this mass group of people who are going back to religious practice, traditional practice. You're going to see a lot of people who are going to be talking about baptisms. Because look at this, we got mutual reception. Neptune's in Aries, Mars is in Pisces. So we're seeing that there is like this revival going on where a lot of people are going to be turning their lives to some kind of religious or spiritual practice. But watch for the false prophets. Watch for the people who are, oh, I know the way. I'll show you the way. Well, you guys saw my Saturn Neptune video, right? You are the way is through you. Not that you can't go to church or follow some of these, religious practices, but I think that I would be weary of anybody who's going to be like, oh, I'm going to lead you to salvation. Be weary of that. All right, so we're going to see that. Obviously, with this merger, it also means that Mars in Pisces is notoriously passive-aggressive. So we can see with the conjunction to Mars, it's merging action and thought. So it can be impressive words, passionate debates, motivational creativity, but tempers will flare, and we want to channel this if we can into artistic pursuits. Really great for like hot saunas and steams because Mercury can be health and it can also be about detoxing. And then Mars is going to be there so we can be doing water fast detoxes, cleanses, purging, that kind of thing. And Pisces is the immune system, by the way. So I've always noticed since we've had a lot of planets in Pisces in recent years, but the retrogrades have been a time where like a lot of people are getting sick or they're having like immune system issues. So really stay up with your health and your hydration and watch for there to be maybe some news about, religious or spiritual kind of persecution. I think that could be part of it. And then on the 17th, a couple days later, we see a triple conjunction, which I was looking at here, between the moon and the north node and Mercury. So look at this, all at 8. Well, 8, 9, but right around there, 17th in the morning. That's the degree which Mercury started its pre-shadow at, so it'll retrograde back to that. And we know 8 degrees is a Scorpio degree, death, transformation, crime, things that are connected to the underworld, things that deal with stuff that's like a sexual nature and documents and information. And Mercury can be children, by the way, guys. So I'm wondering, are we waiting until we get to like mid-March when we really start to see some of this information hitting some of the more mainstream news? I think the fact that, literally when we see Saturn and Neptune coming together and we saw Prince Andrew, who was not only stripped of his royal title, but also arrested, and he got out of jail, they were able to bail him out, should be a message to everybody who was involved in that. So it doesn't matter if you're Bill Gates, if you're Jay-Z, if you're Beyonce, if you're some mega billionaire, if they're willing to arrest people who are obviously royalty, we're going to start to notice probably between now and this period, there's a lot of people who are going missing. They're either wind up dead, they can't find them, or they've gone into hiding, right? So that stuff is going to start happening. And I think it is going to be connected to this because right when Mercury started coming into shadow is when they started doing all like the big like Epstein drop stuff. So that conjunction really is about aligning the mind because Mercury's on the north node, with destiny and emotions. So it can mean that there are fated messages coming in, there's karmic insights, collective shifts, profound for spiritual calling, sure. But I think this is emotional overload. And I think with the South Node ruler being conjunct the North Node, people are super obsessed with the facts and trying to uncover facts, or kind of obsessed with the past and trying to make sense of what's going on with that. And I really feel that it's going to be a time where people are more prone to drink, have mental health issues, all that stuff. So you have to be really careful, because people are going to be kind of crazy with this conjunction, unfortunately. They're going to be frustrated, and there's going to be even more news coming out, and there's going to be people who are like, I don't even know what you're talking about, because they're not putting this stuff on the mainstream media. All right, so then we get to the 20th, and this is when Mercury goes direct. So it'll go direct at 8 degrees. So if we look at this, it'll spend the 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th, 21st, 22nd, 28th, 29th. I mean, over a week conjunct that 8 degrees of Pisces. And then it won't be until the 24th that it really starts moving forward. Now, when it goes direct, that means that the retrograde is over, so we can start to kind of see our way out of it, although I don't think we're going to start to see things really shifting until the 24th, personally, because it'll stay at that degree for a couple days. And this is where resolutions kind of emerge, communication can clear, we can kind of integrate lessons, and we can do that before kind of accelerating and making plans, at least in the Pisces area of our chart. I want to show you guys something. When we see that Mercury comes out of shadow, okay, so we're still going to have to see it go through all of those degrees up till 22 degrees. That won't be until April the 9th, okay? So on April the 9th, when that happens, okay, Mercury's left 22 degrees, Mercury retrograde, shadow is over. What's happening in the skies? Mars is at 0 degrees, reactivating that Saturn-Neptune conjunction, a really potent world point. Mars is conjunct Neptune, so now whatever was going on psychologically becomes physical. And then we're also going to see that the Sun is coming into conjunction with Chiron, and it's the last quarter square. So this may materialize as whatever has been kind of hidden or conspiracy-esque, or things that people have been kind of suggesting is going to happen. Now it becomes realized. Now we start to see the actual physical and financial, or like literal kind of effects of some of this stuff. So there will be a massive shift that's going to happen once we kind of get out of the Mercury retrograde fog. You guys let me know what you think. I'm very curious to hear some of your thoughts. I know some of you guys probably think I'm just like nuts, but sometimes I feel like, working and being on my own makes me feel like I'm in a bubble, and I'm like, I can't be the only one who's seeing some of these cycles. Certainly one of the only astrologers that's talking about it, but that's okay. All right, so we're going to get into what's going on for the week ahead. We're going to talk about February 22nd through March the 1st. So if you guys are watching on Sunday, happy Sunday to my Sunday crew. Thank you guys for joining me. If you're listening on YouTube, on Spotify, if you're finding me on X, thanks for taking me with you as you guys go through your Sunday fun day stuff. As we wake up in the morning, the moon is going to be in Taurus, and we see a nice little sextile happening to the sun, so that's pretty sweet. We also see Venus is getting highlighted today as the moon goes through Taurus, which is about stability, resources, pleasure, good food. And, we are seeing Venus trining Jupiter, so have something sweet today. Do something by water, enjoy yourself, indulge a little bit. It's a really nice aspect. And we're also going to see that as the moon is going through Taurus today, it'll start to also come into a trine with Venus and Mercury. And we'll start to see that as the day goes on. What a beautiful day. I love this. So that's pretty much all morning into the afternoon that it's going to make that sextile to Venus. So abundant today, right? Very sensual. It's emotionally expansive. It feels like a cozy hug, a hot warm meal. I really feel like there's nothing bad I can say about today. So I hope you guys enjoy it. I hope it goes well for you. I would say indulge in self-care. Like, this is the day that you do the face mask. Maybe you make a nice fancy meal. Maybe you spend some time in the garden. You do something that's going to be a little bit more like Venusian and indulgent. And it's great for nurturing relationships and obviously manifesting some abundance too, because we see a sextile that's kind of happening from the moon to Jupiter as well. So it can manifest as abundance through gratitude. I think it's just watch for overeating and overspending. That's definitely something that we see when we've got two of these planets exalted and also in a trine to each other. But it could also just be you're just feeling like you're in a good mood and things feel really sweet. So that's going to be lasting pretty much all day long. Now that's going to take us into Monday, and on Monday when we wake up, it's a very different vibe. It feels like a manic Monday to me on the 23rd, and that's because as we wake up in the morning, the moon is still going through Taurus, so we still have our eyes on Venus, and Venus is still feeling that trine to Jupiter. But when the moon goes through Taurus, we're more focused on money, buying things, consuming things, what's going on with the markets, that kind of stuff. And the moon is going to be coming into a conjunction with Uranus. So it's going to be a little emotionally startling. Still sextiling Mercury. And I have said to you guys that when Mercury starts coming into a sextile with Uranus, you know, it'll stop short of an exact sextile, but this is the canary in the coal mine. So it's going to be about people kind of talking about, well, these are the changes that are coming economically, or these are the changes that are going to be happening with like banks and stuff. The moon will also come into a square with Mars. So it's actually going to square Mars first. So let's look at that. Pretty much first thing in the morning at a 24. So it can be like things are just kind of like, you know, kind of unraveling, or things are just kind of happening out of nowhere. We don't know why there's sudden market fluctuations or money challenges or disruptions with friends. Mars in Aquarius is notorious for, you know, like humanitarian causes or anything that deals with protests or things that are connected to power to the people and the physical or the financial impacts of that, right? So, you know, I mean, and I said to you guys recently, I was like, you know, watch Mars as it starts coming into a square with Uranus, that you're going to see like a Bud Light moment. Apparently, Nestle is having that moment. And they're having that over them trying to kind of dictate and control and have a say about what's going on with water. And I think there's other ties to why people are kind of upset with Nestle, but people are supposedly boycotting Nestle. So if you know why, let me know below in the comments. But I'm wondering if it's like that kind of stuff that I'm seeing, because this could be about food companies or like, you know, that have resources and people are fighting back being like, I'm not supporting this, I'm not buying this. That could be part of it. We could also see a lot of disruption in things that are going on with like tech stocks or AI stocks. And then what else are we going to see? The moon's going to first square Mars around 10 a.m. Central. And then it's going to come into conjunction with Uranus, which is about kind of like emotional, destabilized situations, you know, out of the blue kind of things. Still sextiling Mercury, so it's right before Mercury starts to go retrograde that we can get some news and information. But Mercury retrogrades are pretty notorious for like policies changing, like markets kind of changing in a different direction. So it's stable because it's in Taurus, but right off the bat in the morning, it's then going to kind of come into this square with Mars where people are going to be a little bit more argumentative. They're going to be a little bit more hasty. There could be more friendship or financial kind of dilemma. And then it comes into conjunction with Uranus, which is like going to shock and surprise people. And that'll be around the 3 p.m. hour. And then right when that's done, then it's going to go into Gemini. So things kind of ease up a little bit around the evening hours. And it immediately starts sextiling Saturn and Neptune in Aries, and then it'll start trining Pluto overnight. So there's no key transit on Monday, right? But there's a lot of lunar things going on with the moon squaring Mars and the conjunction to Uranus. So I think that really, you know, stability turns more innovative later in the morning when the moon goes into Gemini. We're more willing to communicate, to chat. There can be some surprises, some surprise ideas. You know, I work with about a 2-degree orb, so I got to tell you guys, knowing that Mars is coming into a square with Uranus, it's going to hit that eclipse degree. You have to be mindful of being in crowds, right? You have to be mindful of following the crowd when it comes to financial advice and people being like, this is the hot new thing, buy this or sell this or trade this, because there could be things that can just turn on a dime. Also be careful with anything that's like hot or sharp. Uranus is things that blow up, and Mars is things that go fast or things that are hot. And Mars in Aquarius can talk about kind of like the angry mob mentality. So a lot of people ganging up and like voting with their wallets or deciding that they're going to boycott or they're not going to buy something. That's the energy of the square. I think that to navigate Monday, know that it's most intense midday when you see that moon square the Mars. Don't make any snap decisions with anything financially is what I would advise you guys to do. Watch the markets because I think they might be a little destabilized with that for sure. Maybe expect that there's going to be some unexpected changes Communicate openly, try to ground with the moon in Taurus. Make sure you guys are eating. If you want to work with your crystals or grounding mats, take a walk outside, you can do that. And watch for stubborn conflicts, because there can be some stubborn conflicts that can kind of come up with that square. Now, as we go into Tuesday, so this will be the 24th, we wake up in the morning and the moon is in Gemini. So it's really highlighting Mercury, and Mercury is basically stationing. It's standing still. So it's going to sit at that 22 degrees for a couple of days before it turns retrograde. So we're feeling the effects of that. And the moon is in the early morning hours trining Pluto. So it's powerful, it's communicative, it's good for networking, it's good for writing, for like sharing with other people. But in the morning, this is the first quarter square. So if you go back to the 17th of February where we had the solar eclipse, that was the new moon. Now the sun and the moon are in a square. So things don't often go according to plan when that happens. There's something that's kind of discombobulated, especially when we see that the square is happening in mutable signs. So a change of circumstance or circumstance are kind of giving way. And Mercury's not doing anything. The moon isn't squaring Mercury, but not only are we having the moon square the sun, which is the first quarter square, we're also going to watch the moon come into square with the north and the south node, which is highlighting Mercury. Media from what? Pisces, other countries, news drops, exposés. So I think that what we're going to find with all of these aspects kind of going on is that, okay, the first quarter moon is basically saying, now we have to take action. What do we have to do? Gemini, communicate, maybe be willing to go back or to reflect on something. This is also about transformative curiosity, right? Gemini is very curious, and that it's kind of building some kind of tension towards growth. So there's a lot of mental buzz on Tuesday. There's also a lot of karmic nudges. Usually when we see, the moon squaring its own nodes, it means that that's kind of like where fate steps in. And I think it's going to be where all of us are starting to get some really strong intuitive hits. Now, to navigate, I think, with these transits on Tuesday, because the only major transit that's taking place is the first quarter moon, but that's very early in the morning. Research deeply, use common sense, question narratives, ask questions. Remember that this is also a good time to network, but release overthinking, because I think with like the Mercury square, the north and the south node, and with Mercury retrograde, I think it's about not jumping to conclusions and assuming that we have all of the story or all of the pieces of the puzzle, or that we understand everything that's kind of going on. And I think that this is also a time where we will get some kind of clarity, but we kind of have to turn within. So you're going to see the first quarter square really early in the morning. The moon will square the north and the south node at an 8, which is interesting. So that talks about a huge shift, I think, with how we're thinking or communicating our media narrative. And then the moon is just going to continue, and then it's pretty much unaspected. We don't really see much else for the rest of the day. Now, it's not going to start to pick up anything until overnight hours, where the moon is going to square Venus, and it'll start coming into a square with Mercury early on Wednesday, okay? So let's go to Wednesday, and we wake up in the morning, and we've got moon still in Gemini, so we're still focusing on communication, and communication's not clear with Mercury stationing. Moon's going to square Venus in Pisces, and then we're going to see moon square Mercury in Pisces. For sure, Wednesday is like a very challenging communication day, at least in my opinion. There is this sense of things being distorted or not translated correctly, or emails going missing, or misunderstandings, and like especially short distance travel, Gemini. So if you have to go on a road trip, if you're trying to buy a car, if you're trying to sign a contract, if you're trying to sit down and write, there's like a lot of like static and a lot of things that we can kind of get distracted with, or we get kind of confused, or we need to go and do more research. That's going to be a big one, especially journalists. I think we're going to see a lot of issues with journalists that are having issues trying to get all the facts or trying to get all the pieces together. Maybe they're working on things and it's going to take longer to kind of get some of this stuff out. We will see the moon sextile Chiron and Aries, so that's a positive. But outside of that, there's not much else that's going to be going on. We will see that the moon will come into a trine with Mars, which is helpful. It kind of helps diffuse a little bit of the incoming square to Uranus. And that's going to happen in the afternoon hours. So communication is a little bit easier in the late afternoon hours, when the moon is in a trine to Mars, which is closer to like 3:30, 4 o'clock. And then after that, we are going to see the moon go into Cancer. And when the moon goes into Cancer, it's sitting at 0 degrees. This is late in the evening on Wednesday, the 25th. So we're seeing 2 planets sitting at world axis points. Could things happen? Maybe, but if you're up this late, just know that emotions and actions aren't really kind of, working together. I think that when I put what's going on Wednesday, communication hurdles, yes, it can heal, in a very dynamic way if we just take time to kind of ask questions. It can also mean that we shift from feeling more scattered in the daytime to feeling more nurturing in the evening hours with the moon going through Cancer. I also think that to navigate the astrology on Wednesday, it's about healing old wounds through better communication and taking bold steps, but avoiding gossip, right? And then also doing something kind of comfortable and homey and things that make us feel like a little bit more secure as that moon's going into Cancer in the PM hours. This is going to take us into Thursday, okay? So Thursday is when things get a little bit more intense. And that's because we are going to start seeing with the Mars square to Uranus is coming in hot. The moon is sitting in Cancer when we wake up in the morning, and it is coming into a trine with the sun. So this is a nice aspect. Cancer moon is more about emotions, home and family, and security, and the sun in Pisces is really highlighting rest and kind of, healing. We're also going to be seeing that this is when Mercury starts its retrograde. And obviously you guys know about the 22 degree and how it's going to be probably something to deal with leadership. But this is where we start to see that there's going to be some challenges. There's going to be some challenges that are going to happen this day. Now, the positive is that the sun's conjunct the north node and that the moon is conjuncting not only the sun, but also the north node. So this is another fateful day, particularly like in the morning hours of the 26th. Mercury starts its retrograde, sun conjuncts the north node. So I look at this as I'm like, wow, what is going on here? Like, this is where the Mercury retrograde started, 8 degrees, or the shadow. This is where we're also seeing the Mercury retrograde go back to. This is around the same degree that we're going to see, Mars and Mercury come into conjunction with. Like, what the heck? And I know this is the jockey, right? I don't even need to read it. I read it to you guys several times, but winning the game of life. So I don't know, but if you have anything around 7, 8, or 9 degrees of Pisces, this is very, very pertinent to you. And 8 always deals with change and transformation, but it also deals with death. It deals with crime, exposing things that are kind of dark and like scorpionic in nature. So there are some crimes and things that are being concealed. It's very, very obvious to me. I do think that because Pisces has that energy also of like hidden enemies, like things are going to be revealed about what's working against you. And like we know that self-undoing is Pisces, so we can be our own worst enemy. But this is really where some of our work habits, eating habits, lifestyle habits are actually like contributing to some of our issues with health and depression and kind of like isolation. So it's about kind of tuning into that, healing that, getting out of our own way so that way we can move forward. So on the 26th, I think it's positive because there can be this emotional kind of destiny that's aligning with expansion because the sun's conjunct the north node. Intuitive, fateful, heartfelt. Is it possible because the sun is at an 8 that we hear about the death of a very prominent male figure? For sure, we could definitely see that. Jupiter in Cancer is notorious for being about ends of lives, burial, like, death. More so like not the mourning, but kind of like how people are found. Things that are connected to graves, also Pisces is ancestors. So I'm anticipating a lot of people are going to feel like the veil is very thin and they're having connections with ancestors or they're having dreams about people who have passed. But we can see that there is about to be the death of like a really prominent man that can happen with that sitting at 8 degrees. All right, so my advice for you guys is to just tap into what's intuitive on this day. Realize there's like a lot of fateful things happening, and this is about being more heartfelt. Trust your gut feelings on Thursday. Connect with family. But remember that the retrograde is starting, so maybe it's about more meditating on what you want to release before you're figuring out some of your future visions. All right, and then this is going to take us throughout the day. So we're going to see the moon come into a trine with the sun in the early afternoon. Then the moon will come into conjunction with Jupiter, which is sweet, but people can be a little bit overly emotional. Thankfully, it's happening in the middle of the night. And then this is going to take us to February the 27th, where we wake up with the moon in Cancer still. And the moon is going to trine Venus, and it's going to trine Mercury. So this is a nice little window of like what can be decent or better communication, especially with relationships, money, and business. However, Mercury's still retrograde. And we're going to see that this is the time, this day on the 27th, that Mars is going to square Uranus. Now, 27s deal with cars, communication, media. It deals with brothers, sisters, things that split. So I'm like, oh, is there going to be a really prominent like stock split or something that's going to happen? Is there going to be a lot of people talking about some kind of like conflict, you know, potential of war? Mars and Uranus is very, very war, but it feels like very kind of like nuclear and things that are in the air and things that are like missile related to me. So it's hard to say, but this is the day that you don't want to be speeding, anything sharp, anything electric, anything like that. Watch for it because there can be sudden things that can happen out of the blue. Obviously, Mars is influencing Saturn and Neptune, so it's going to be things that, you know, general individuals aren't anticipating or aren't seeing coming. They're like asleep, right? And so Mars can represent, as it's coming into a superior square with Uranus, this pressure from AI, technology, politics, the future, the people, on banks, resources, things that deal with food, things that deal with, I mean, all kinds of things that bring us like stability and security. So this would be the day that I'd be like, is there going to be some weird stuff going on with the market? Yeah, probably, because this isn't just squaring Uranus. It's coming back into the same conjunction degree as the eclipse. So on the 27th, okay, nice, right? Moon's going to trine Venus and Mercury in Pisces. Moon is going to, yes, square Chiron at some point in the later day. And then the moon will come into a sextile with Uranus. So it's going to kind of stabilize a little bit. But even with like the bisextile that's going to happen between the moon, Uranus, and like Jupiter, you know, between the moon, Uranus, and Mercury and Venus, boom, 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 that does not take away from this square. And the square is going to happen midday at 27 degrees. So if you have anything 26, 27, 28 degrees are the fixed signs, Taurus, Scorpio, Leo, and Aquarius, pay close attention to the square because there could be some fighting words going on here. I think that my advice for you guys would be to not just pay attention to this square. Like, God, there's always something, right? When there's something kind of positive happening, because I'm looking at the trines. We've got a Mars square Uranus, and then we've also got Mercury retrograde conjunct Venus. And what does Venus rule? Taurus. So, we're reworking, or we're walking back, or we're reassessing, you know, the rules or the agreements of what's going on with banks and banking. Watch that. Watch that. And I was talking to my husband about it the other day. I was like, what's the deal? There's like stuff going on where, you know, banks are now like saying, oh, you know, as of March, you know, 20th or blah, 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 you know, like certain accounts that are in savings, you know, there's new laws and rules and regulations, you know, to bank with us, and that it would be moved into this account. Why? Why are banks doing that? Why are banks planning potentially to have to kind of move stuff into other accounts or hold on to things? You know, I mean, look at what's going on in New York City. Not politicking, but look at what's going on in New York City. So the most recent, is it the mayor or the governor? I can't remember. But Mandami, he basically came and gave a presentation this week, and he said, look, you know, New York needs more money. The city needs more money, and we either raise, you know, taxes basically on the wealthy people, or if we don't do that, then he showed a graph and he went, we're going to take money from the rainy day fund. We're going to raise property taxes, which in turn will raise rent for individuals. And we're going to fire 5,000 police officers. Now, I don't live in New York City, so I can't speak for people who live in New York, but I can tell you I have a lot of clients and a lot of friends who live there. And I would be pissed. If that's who I voted for, I would not be happy, because now you're realizing that the people, Mars and Aquarius, are getting angry about the increasing costs. And it's not just there. We're hearing people who are now living in these places, in these states where they have all these new data centers that are being built. And they're, you know, getting bills online that they're showing on social media, on Twitter. And they're like, yeah, my electric bill has like tripled in like the last 3 months. Like people are going from, you know, having $200-300 electric bills to like close to $1,000. Because they're bringing in all these data centers. And people don't realize that if you want AI, if you want all this development and technology, data centers are going to be built. It's going to increase energy costs because the energy is going to that. And then also on top of that, some of these centers that are connected with AI are also going to be absorbing a hell of a lot of water. Here in Texas, we're actually seeing a lot of people who are involved who are trying to push back against building some data centers because they're aware of just how much it's actually going to take resources away from people who live there water. And for some reason, they apparently like to use fresh water. I don't know the story behind that, but people get angry when Mars is in Aquarius. And when it squares Uranus, it's going to be about money, rising costs, expenses, and things that are connected to banks and also fees. So people can get really riled up about sudden energy increases and, you know, food increases and what things are going to start kind of costing, which, you know, rightfully so. Now, this is the day that Mercury and Venus are going to conjunct. So there is this sense of kind of feeling like we need to kind of pivot, or there is this rearrangement going on with relationships or how we communicate in relationships. So there is a delay of funds, or somebody takes a little bit longer to sign the contract, that kind of stuff. So there's loving reviews or financial reviews that clash with sudden changes, sudden sparks. There's going to be pivots and people are going to go, and I'm, you know, repositioning myself. And I got to tell you guys, I think because this is about the news, and you know what, you're not going to hear about what the big companies are doing. You're not going to hear about how billionaires are repositioning themselves. You're going to want to pay attention to what's going on with some of the international, like importing and tariffs and things that are kind of connected to international markets. It's not just the country that you live in. Maybe we see silver change direction again, because it made quite a big dip over the last couple of months. I think it was like last couple of weeks. I think it was like a 2 or 3 day period, and it dropped like 60%. I say that because silver is Cancer. Okay, so we're going to see that this is being influenced by Jupiter retrograde in Cancer. I think maybe you're going to see more people who are going to be buying back in. Maybe the price recorrects in some way and it rises again as it's coming into a trine with Jupiter. But I'm just speculating. This is not financial advice, but been pretty bang on with a lot of this stuff. If you guys want some more sprinkles, I would say I would be keeping an eye on gas and oil prices, because Saturn Neptune is notorious for gas and oil wars. Or there is some limitation of where there can be trade of some of these things. I think that might be something that we're going to see, especially as we're getting into like April. So to navigate on Friday, this is really about revisiting affections, doing it gently. Some of those ex phone calls, you don't want to pick them up. Just because you had a dream about your ex doesn't mean you need to go back. Just want to reiterate that. Innovate routines and avoid any rash actions in relationships, contracts, or money. Breathe. Whatever's going on, just take a breath, because I think that a lot of people are going to be like, oh my God, they're rolling this back, or they're changing this, or like, what's going to happen? You know, and people are going to kind of freak out a little bit. We'll watch the moon continue to go through Cancer. It's going to pick up that square to Chiron around the afternoon hours, and then it's going to sextile Uranus in the evening, and then it will go into Leo overnight. And we'll wake up on Saturday the 28th with the moon in Leo. And Saturday morning is drama. Moon's going to oppose Pluto. So people are in their feelings. People are kind of getting a little splashy, and they're being a little dramatic, or they're wanting to focus on creativity, or there's a lot of things going on with children or like lovers, and some clash emotionally Saturday morning. So try to stay away from that. Lean into the trine to Saturn and Neptune, which can be great for just taking time to kind of do your own thing early in the morning, get a workout in, do something creative. And while the moon is going through Leo, we're looking at the sun, and the sun is just moving through Pisces, pretty unexpected. There's nothing going on. We'll see the moon and the sun in conjunct or quincunx each other. So that's not really doing anything. It might mean some of us want to be more creative and kind of loud and proud. And some of us are like, actually, I want to wait and just kind of reflect. Now, the other aspect that we're going to be seeing is now, even though Mars has come out of a square with Uranus, so that happened on the 27th, Mars is now sitting at the degree where we had the solar eclipse in Aquarius on the 17th. So it will reactivate that. And even this is at a Cancer degree, emotions. Stone square to Uranus, so things can be kind of like anything goes. But I feel like this is definitely going to be kicking up some drama. So think about what got initiated, or what new things were coming forward for you in the Aquarius area of your chart. This may be where you're feeling like, it's time to kind of take some kind of action. So on Saturday, you know, that's going to bring something up. It can bring up some tension in social groups, or in regards to being propelled into the future and now needing to kind of be full steam ahead. Moon in Leo wants us to be creative. And I think that the positive is the early morning trine to Saturn and Neptune is bringing in that structure. Obviously, there is this kind of power dynamic that's going on early in the morning. That'll fade. It's expressive, but there is some intensity. I think that if you guys get out of that in the morning and the moon starts moving out of that opposition with Pluto, so right around kind of late morning, midday, things are going to ease up a little bit. And this is a good day to really kind of focus on being confident, shining, being creative. Maybe you're a little bit more private about that. Maybe you're working on things that you're getting ready to release. And maybe it's just like the sense of anticipation that it's more about the creative process before you actually kind of share what's changing with other people. Still important to set boundaries without trying to Saturn and, maybe transform control issues. Try to focus on something that brings you joy or something that's going to be self-expressive. So great for performance, hanging out with kids, hanging out with a romantic partner, doing anything that's going to be kind of creative. And then the moon will continue to go through Leo all day on Saturday. Not really making any aspects to anything. It'll in conjunct or quincunx the sun around the 28th at 7 p.m., 8 p.m.-ish. And then it's going to keep moving. And then that's going to take us into Sunday, which will be March the 1st. How is it March already? What the heck? And then first thing in the morning, the moon is still going through Leo. So only thing you're really going to see the moon do is trine Chiron on Sunday. And then it will also come into a square with Uranus. And guys, we're coming into the lunar eclipse energy. So the end of this week feels like something big is coming because we're going to have that full moon lunar eclipse on the 3rd. So things get a little dramatic, right before we get into like the finale. Nothing is going on with the sun. The sun is not doing anything. It's not close enough to be a trine yet. You guys are going to see that next week. We're also seeing that nothing else is coming into a trine with Jupiter quite yet. That'll be next week. And then Mars hits 29 degrees. So it's that critical degree of feeling like everything's kind of just in the air. Things feel very kind of like electric. And I think they're going to feel a little bit more peaceful when we get Mars that's going into Pisces briefly. So no major transits on Sunday. This is really good for healing flare. Obviously, there's a little bit of like a disruptive twist that you'll see at the end of the day when the moon comes into a square with Uranus in the evening. And this is about, things being a little bit bold and unpredictable, but still opportunities to heal, especially on the self level with the moon trining Chiron. I love that for just playtime or, kind of getting in touch with the inner child or doing something that's about self-development, art therapy, dance, creativity, that kind of stuff. And just really embracing self-expression. And maybe a lot of it's about healing kind of like ego wounds or identity wounds. Watch for some of the surprises that can happen Sunday night when the moon comes into a square with Uranus. But I think it's about adapting to some of those surprises and kind of leading with our heart. Now, I do want to read to you guys, and I meant to do this earlier, but because of that Mars-Uranus aspect, I'd like to talk to you. So this is Archetypal Universe. I love this. Whenever I'm looking for like good planetary combination flavors, I want to see what it says about Mars and Uranus here. So let's see. So Mars and Uranus. Should have marked it, guys. Sorry. That's Venus. There we go. All right, so let's see what it says about Mars and Uranus, just to give you guys some feedback, because usually it's a little disruptive. Here we go. Mars and Uranus in astrology. So dynamic urges towards freedom, independence, determined cravings for thrills, excitement, sudden breakthroughs, rushes of energy, electric yang energy, tendencies towards excessive self-will, reckless courage, defiance, impulsive, rash actions, flashes of anger. Okay, so decisive courage and willpower, flashy and swashbuckling style, dynamic urges towards freedom and independence. I sound my barbaric yap over the roofs of the world. What else does it say? Carpe diem, seize the day, experiment, successful after determined effort, feelings of erotic emancipation, zeal, hot-blooded passion, excitement, the mad naked summer night, sudden eruptions of energy, release of anger, active rebellion against inner tyrants, superego, shadow qualities, here we go, tendencies towards excessive self-will, contention, irritability and independence, desires for sudden change, unfocused output, reckless and courage, high flying, contempt for the mediocre, right? Attraction to things that are dangerous. untouchable hunters, such as birds of prey, sudden eruptions of fire, flashes of lightning. You guys get the idea. So just things that can happen very suddenly and feeling like it's almost just like there's like a pressure cooker and then it's going to pop. And so we will see that. We can see some things that can be kind of explosive like that this week, okay? All right, so obviously you guys are like, let me hear about the Mercury retrograde. Well, let's take it back to when the retrograde begins so you guys can see that. And I'm going to be showing you guys the retrograde from the perspective of the whole rising sign system. I'm a Western astrologer. That's the kind of astrology I like to practice. So listen to your rising sign so you can see which house Mercury is retrograding through. I'm going to give you guys some insights and some tips for what to watch for and what might be manifesting in which houses Mercury rules for you. Once again, it's retrograding from 22 degrees of Pisces back to 8 degrees. My Pisces, Virgo, and Gemini risings, you guys are going to be feeling it the most. And I'm going to start with Aries risings. And if you are a Placidus user, just look for where 22 degrees is in your chart. You may have to listen to one other rising sign. Okay. So for my Aries and Aries risings, you guys are going to see the Mercury retrograde happening in your 12th house. All right. So the 12th house is subconscious, secrets, your dreams, solitude, healing. So the theme is going to be about kind of dreamy isolation and hidden revelations. Mercury rules your 3rd house, which is connected to communication, short distance trips and siblings, and your 6th house, which deals with health routines, habits, and your daily work. So I'm assuming you could see some miscommunications with work. Maybe there's some time away from work. Maybe you're feeling under the weather. You're taking a trip and you're away from work, and so you're out of range or you can't check your emails. It could also mean that you're just choosing to kind of take a bit of like a spiritual retreat, and you're trying to focus on getting your mind, body, spirit in balance, and that there's a sense of undoing illusions. So for my Aries risings, it might mean that there are past traumas that come up and that you're healing it. Maybe you're healing it through meditation. Maybe you're going to therapy. I would just say watch escapism tendencies, meditate daily if you can, try to keep a dream journal, and definitely take some much needed time to rest. Expect that there's going to be some intuitive downloads that are going to give you a sense of direction, and you'll have some better understanding of where you're moving forward. And you're probably going to be also feeling a little bit better come the 20th of March. All right, so we've got my Taurus and Taurus risings. You guys will experience Mercury retrograde in Pisces in your natal 11th house. Obviously, the 11th house deals with your friends, your groups, your hopes, your dreams, your wishes, and your networks. So as Mercury retrogrades here, you're going to be reevaluating some of your friendships. It's possible that you're reassessing what your future goals are, where you see yourself going. And Mercury rules your 2nd house of money and value and your 5th house of creativity and anything that deals with romance or children. So it's linking these themes to your 11th house. So the theme is going to be about, okay, you know, there's idealistic goals about creating businesses, having fun, making money. But it's going to be like, what is realistic, right? Are you being idealistic about your goals, and like what is actually achievable? It is possible that some of your group projects can hit a little bit of a snag or a delay. Also, old friends can come back for you to reconnect, and it can be loving because Mercury is going to retrograde conjunct Venus. So it could mean that somebody's coming back to you saying, hey, I really value our friendship, or, you know, I'm interested in what you have, or I want to collaborate with you, or I really miss you. So watch for those reconnections. And I would say review your aspirations, you know, network mindfully, avoid any kind of vague communications or commitments with friends or social groups. There's going to be better clarity for some of this stuff at the end of March for you. All right, we've got Gemini and Gemini rising. What's up, Gemini? You guys are going to be experiencing Mercury turning retrograde in Pisces. Obviously, Mercury rules you, so wherever Mercury is where you are. So you're reworking, rethinking, redoing, reassessing something about your professional life, your reputation, your career, your purpose, you know, out in the world. Even if you're retired or if you're a parent, it's like, what can I do? And Mercury also rules your 4th house of home and family. So when we kind of put that all together, you know, with the connection to your 1st house of self and your 4th house of home, this is about kind of blending your identity with, you know, your emotional home or family needs to better kind of navigate where you're going in a professional way. So there can be foggy ambitions. You can also feel like there is some authority illusions or miscommunications at work, or, you know, there's people kind of changing positions at work, or you're segueing from one field into another, or you're leaving a job, or you're going back to a job. It is possible that for some Gemini risings, you could see that there could be job offers that are retracted. So be careful with that. Slowing down of negotiations or agreements, and you might go back to an old job, or a boss might step down. It's also possible that there may be some big announcement about changes happening with your company. What I would recommend doing, though, is polish your resume, right? Go and do that. Rework something about your LinkedIn, your headshots. Reflect on, you know, your role when it comes to your family. And a lot of it can be about what you're stepping up to and kind of taking responsibility for on the home front, and balancing your needs with the needs of work and also home. So I would really recommend not launching any businesses or not being set on making any definitive job changes at this time. Really great, though, with some of the trines to Jupiter, you'll see opportunities for renegotiations, and I think feeling a lot better about, you know, the changes that are happening at work. All right, good luck, Gemini. For Cancer and Cancer rising, you guys are going to see Mercury turn retrograde in Pisces in your natal 9th house. The house that deals with your beliefs, travel, expansion, education, you know, legal matters, mentors, teachers. And Mercury is directly tied to your 12th house of the subconscious and the past, and also hidden enemies, and the 3rd house of communication, siblings, contracts, and short distance trips. So as Mercury retrogrades in your 9th, one thing that I would watch for is that there can definitely be a lot of reviewing or reassessing something legal, something that involves education, or something that involves travel. If you're traveling, right, double check your accommodations, get to your flights early, put luggage tags on your bags, make sure you have all your documents, you don't forget something or lose something, particularly gadgets that can happen with this retrograde. And I think a lot of this is about learning how to communicate and talk about your hidden fears. And some of you guys might be going back into a spiritual practice, or you might be reconnecting with like a teacher or a guru. And there can be like this sense of returning back to a place you visited before, or some kind of spiritual questioning when it comes to your broader visions about the world. I do predict there could be like legal or educational snags. So if you're trying to, file legal documents, if you're trying to apply for a program, if you're trying to, book a trip, I would be like, not a good time to do that. Definitely focus on those journeys being more inward than external. And I would say study intuitively, maybe revisit some things that you have kind of studied or learned about in the past. And there will be some kind of shift, I think, in your belief system, especially how it impacts how you communicate and kind of connect with other people. Good luck. For Leo and Leo rising, you guys are going to be experiencing Mercury going retrograde in Pisces in your natal 8th house. Obviously, the 8th house is the house that deals with intimacy, shared resources, taxes, transformation. It can also be about secrets. So as you see this Mercury retrograde setting up, it's picking up the energy of your 2nd house of money, your personal money and resources, and the 11th house of gains, goals, friends, and networks. So the 8th house is about karmic entanglement, right? So when I say like other people's money, taxes, insurance, inheritance, partner's money, spousal support, child support, all that stuff kind of comes through here. So when you have this Mercury retrograde, it can be about deep emotional reviews and, what is mine and what is yours, or what is ours, and a lot of financial mix-up. So we can see some issues with delays with being able to get, wires, or, investments, issues with being able to get lines of credit. It could also mean that it's kind of linking money to some of your social debts because of Mercury's connection to your 11th house. And the themes really are going to be about trust and like secrets revealed. Now, I predict that for some of you guys, if you've had a long-standing inheritance issue or tax issue, it can still continue, but you might actually wrap it up here in the next month and a half. There can also be some very intense periods of just working through fears, trauma, or healing. Definitely audit your finances during this time. I would say try to get your tax stuff in order prior to the retrograde. At least get all of like the documents ready to go if you're handing it over to someone. Watch for issues with dealing with other people's money. So like settlements, negotiations, partners' money can be a challenge here. And it's really good for healing vulnerability. So this is a wonderful time. If you're like, I'm thinking about going back to therapy or working with a therapist, there can be some really significant breakthroughs during this retrograde, especially around the time of the Cazimi. when Mercury comes into conjunction with the sun, which is your Lord. Good luck, Leo. For Virgo and Virgo rising, you guys are going to be seeing a Mercury retrograde in Pisces. This impacts you big time because Mercury is your chart ruler. It also rules your career status and reputation. So as it retrogrades in your 7th house, it's pulling on your influence and also your responsibility when it comes to relationships, partners, and others. Now, that could be a therapist, that could be a business partner, that could be a spouse, that could be a client. And usually when Mercury goes retrograde in your 7th house, the way other people communicate is topsy-turvy, right? They're kind of ghosty, they're in and they're out, they're back and they're forth. But it can also be mirroring you kind of being back and forth about a relationship situation as well, because you're Mercury. So a lot of relationship reevaluation. There is definitely some fogginess revolving around contracts and negotiations. Obviously, as your chart ruler, it's affecting your identity and your status via others. So I've seen like a lot of Virgo and Virgo risings that are like, I think I'm finally ready to like, call it a wrap on this relationship. This person's kind of in and out. Now I just want to be done. For others, it can mean you're going deeper into existing relationships and you're like confiding in each other and you're like learning to work through your issues. You're working with a therapist or a couples therapist. You are one of the signs that might be hearing from people from the past. So just know that that retrograde can bring people back, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're there to stay. And it's really going to be about maybe if you're on the other side of, being single, getting back into dating, or if you're going through a separation, coming up with a settlement or an agreement so you can actually separate. Yes, ex-partners can surface. We can also see negotiations can stall. Try to communicate empathically, understand that there's going to be a whole process to this. And I think the silver lining is like some of the trines to Jupiter means that you're going to get by with a little help from some good friends. And maybe it's about trying to kind of be on the same team and trying to focus on joint goals so you can kind of be better together and communicate better. Especially because Mercury is going to retrograde conjunct Venus. It can be a time where you're really reinvesting yourself in a relationship and you're trying to kind of get closer to that person and really value them. So reflect on some of the themes of that mirror kind of energy. And I would say nothing's really settled until we get out of, like the shadow. So in April, after the eclipse in your sign and after the retrograde, you're going to see where the dust has settled in relationships. Good luck, Virgo. That's going to be fun. Very similar to last spring. All right, so for my Libras, Libra risings, Mercury is turning retrograde in Pisces in your 6th house. Mercury rules the 12th house of self-undoing, what's hidden, and obviously it can be about secret enemies and things that are working against you, and also the 9th house, which deals with travel, education, legal matters in your belief system. So as Mercury is retrograde in your 6th, Libra, you're being asked to reevaluate or reassess your house of health, work, and routines. This means it will affect your daily habit. It can be time for daily habit overhaul. There can be some wellness opportunities that you can kind of integrate into your daily routine. It could also mean that there is this huge focus on maybe, getting into a better swing of a routine and like sleeping better, or, getting into a routine that's going to structure your health, your diet, your fitness, your work. Some of you guys might have changes with your work plans. You might have changes with your education or your travel plans. So you need to watch for that. And I do think that this is really the theme is about being of service and healing patterns. So there can be job miscommunications, especially with coworkers, but there can also be some breakthroughs with your mind, body, spirit balance and some health insights. Keep an eye on the health of your pets. Be ready to revise your schedules. And really this is about kind of prioritizing self-care. Yoga, anything flow, anything detox related can be really beneficial for you. And I would be paying attention because Mercury is going to retrograde conjunct Venus. So you're going to kind of see that you can kind of naturally fall into the flow with better health and habits if you're just willing to let things go and probably not be so self-critical and get some better sleep. Good luck, Libra. Scorpio risings. You guys are going to be experiencing Mercury's retrograde in Pisces in your natal 5th house. Fellow sister water sign. So you are going to, I think, enjoy this, even though a retrograde is not the easiest. In your 5th house, and the fact that it's retrograding conjunct Venus is very relational for you. 5th house is about romance, children, creative projects, self-employment, taking risks. I would also watch for when Mercury is conjunct Mars. That's going to be towards the end of the cycle, but when Mercury is conjunct Mars, it may represent some big turning point involving children, a creative project, a hobby, self-employment. something that you've been working on or something that you have been investing in that starts to kind of change for the positive. Mercury deals with joint finances, resources, and other people's money, as well as the 11th house of friends, goals, and allies. So for my Scorpios, it's really about trying to get more so in touch with creativity, romance, and joy. So what it will do is it will help you remove artistic blocks. It's also about playful revisions. I think that this is really linking fun to deeper values, and there could be more inspired kind of expression coming from this, a little bit more childlike kind of behavior and wonder. Yes, you can hear from exes. Yes, this can also be a time where some of you guys could find out you're pregnant. It could also be a time where you go back to an old project and you decide to kind of like revitalize it and then relaunch it. So creative projects are going to do a bit of a rewind, and flings that you've had can kind of resurface, and there can be some changes going on with kind of casual relationships. But try to find something that's like a muse for you during this period, because the aspects that it makes with the trines to Jupiter and also with the conjunction to Mars can actually be really, really wonderful. And the Venus conjunction too. And if you have kids, keep an eye on your kids, because it can be about some changes that are kind of happening with them. Good luck, Scorpio. I think you're one of the ones that's going to have it a little bit more easy than the other signs. Sag rising. Mercury's going to retrograde in Pisces in your natal 4th house. 4th house is home, family, roots, the past, your private life. It does connect to your 7th house of relationships and your 10th house of career, reputation, and your professional life. Naturally, when Mercury retrogrades in the 4th house, what we find is that there is some change or rearrangement of our emotions, maybe things in the house, maybe we're thinking about moving, maybe we have to go back home, maybe there's something going on with parents. Keep an eye on things that break down, that involve water. When Mercury conjuncts Mars, things break down. So you could see that, a dishwasher, kind of like fries out, or there's an issue with a fridge or a washing machine, or there's issues with pipes. You can also find that this is really about family reflections and your emotional foundation. Now, because Mercury is tied to relationships and career, it can be like, well, how much of this is my responsibility? And like, can a sibling kind of jump in and help me? Or, am I asking my partner to kind of help me? You might be going back and forth, debating with a partner if you're going to move or relocate. I know that this doesn't seem, for some of you guys, like it makes sense, but this incoming eclipse in Virgo that's going to oppose this means that you're going to probably step away from work or responsibility to focus more on what's going on at home or with a parent or like a move situation. So blending that all together, the themes are going to be about nurturing security and ancestral healing. There can be delays with home moves. Get your home inspections if you're trying to buy. Be careful with flooding. Make sure you read the fine print on leases. Moves can take much longer than you need, and there can be some family secrets that can kind of emerge, but I would advise you to try to declutter your space. Go through, get rid of old stuff that's broken down or not working, donate things, recycle things, and in particular closets and things that are kind of hidden spaces, because it's going to conjunct Mars. And also when Mercury retrogrades, it's going to conjunct Venus. So rethink, maybe just pump the brakes on buying a space or making a definitive decision about moving. Some of these trines to Jupiter, your chart ruler indicates that there's going to be some change with your financial situation, which could be better off for you down the road if you were to wait, or if you were to improve your home and then decide to sell it at a later date. But watch for some of the grand finales with some of the Saturn kind of Neptune themes that are wrapping up now. Good luck. All right, Capricorn and Capricorn rising, you guys are going to do Mercury retrograde in Pisces in your 3rd house of the mind, communication, gadgets, siblings, neighbors, vehicles, short distance travel. This is the junk drawer of astrology. And Mercury is tied to your 6th house of health and habits and your 9th house of travel and education or legal matters. So Capricorn, with Mercury turning retrograde in your 3rd house, to me, it looks like it's going to be about this rethinking and reworking of how you communicate, right? So you might feel like there is a bit of like a mental fog. It can also mean that there is a bit of an issue or a snag with dealing with a neighbor or a sibling. Maybe there is a computer or a car that has like a breakdown. It can also mean that there is a delay with traveling or any documents pertaining to traveling or to education. I think that this is really about kind of also reworking your schedule, because Mercury is connected to your 6th house, and like implementing like new tech or softwares to help you do that. Potentially some changes also with, documentation. So read the fine print, be very careful about stuff you sign. Not a good time to plan a trip, buy a car, sign a contract personally. There are some things with Mercury trine Jupiter that you have to kind of talk through either with a therapist, a family member, or a spouse before you start making some of these bigger decisions. Watch for sibling reconnections, watch for study revisions, double and triple check all of your messages. This is where you're going to send the butt dials. This is where you're going to lose emails. This is where also you're going to overlook some things that you need to kind of, like I said, really read into the details on. But when this is over, you're going to find that I think it's going to actually give you a better direction of some of the plans that's going on the home front, because these planets are then going to move into your 4th house. So a lot of sibling stuff or a lot of kind of travel things before you're really kind of getting situated and figuring out where home is going to be or how you're going to navigate a family dilemma. Good luck. For Aquarius and Aquarius risings, this Mercury retrograde will be in Pisces in your 2nd house of money, resources, values, and self-esteem. Now, Mercury is tied to your 5th house of children, creative projects, and taking risks. It's also tied to the 8th house of joint finances, investments, intimacy, and other people's money. So as Mercury retrogrades through your 2nd house, it goes without being said, there can be a slowdown or a change in direction with your financial situation. So this means financial reviews are important. Watch for self-worth illusions. Watch your budgeting. I think that this is about having an abundant mindset, right? The positive is that it's going to kind of come into conjunction with Venus, and it's also going to trine Jupiter. So I think you're investing more in yourself. You're knowing your worth. It's improving your health. Maybe changes with your eating habits or your spending habits, because there's been some shifts maybe happening at work could kind of happen. Yeah, you can see some income delays. I mean, certainly, that eclipse coming up in March in your 8th house talks about kind of trying to get money in, but there's like a delay with swapping money around or having to pay something or having to pay taxes or somebody having to pay you back for something. And this is just a really good time to reevaluate your belongings. Now, try to budget effectively, maybe affirm your worth. And this is a good time actually to sell old things. Like you could sell collections, or you could, get rid of some junk or have a yard sale, especially if there's stuff that belongs to your kids, or if there are some things that are like old hobby related things. I'm talking to some Aquarius risings that are like, yeah, well, like now I'm at home more, I'm not working as much. And as a result of that, like I just see how much stuff my kids have around and we need to get rid of stuff. And they're doing that to kind of fund going on a family vacation, right? Mercury's going to retrograde conjunct Venus. And some of the delays that are going to happen, even though they're kind of agitating, or there could be like a couple weeks where money is kind of tight, ultimately it's going to bring you more, because Mars is going to come into your 2nd house, and you're also going to see that it's going to trine Jupiter. So really good for budgeting and any changes with your dietary habits. Good luck. And then we've got the Pisces. Pisces. Mercury is going to go retrograde in your sign. I really want you guys to think about what happened last spring, where you had a Mercury retrograde in your sign and you were also having an eclipse in Virgo in your 7th. Obviously, when Mercury goes retrograde in your 1st house, it involves you personally. So how you communicate, how you feel, how you look. And the effects can be about a personal reinvention, but it can also create a little bit of foggy self-perception. Now, Mercury rules your 4th house of home and family. It's also connected to relationships and partners, and the South Node is there, so people from the past. So it can be a lot of reinventing yourself if you're in the process of changing your home or kind of being in limbo relationship-wise, and when Mercury retrogrades, you can have the ability to make a change with your home or your relationship status. I think that factored in with an incoming eclipse and the fact that Mercury is going to come into conjunction with Venus, which is more about self-love. The Sun, which is more about your health, your needs, your habits, and then Mars, which is going to be your money. It's almost like you are going to be completely reworking everything about your philosophy, and you're starting right at home. You're starting with yourself. Be mindful that you can overlook things. You can be a little bit more isolating when it comes to relationships or family, or maybe certain situations on the home front or relationship-wise, things have changed, which is prompting you to go, okay, well, what do I do next? What's the next step? I think that if you can be compassionate with your self-view, if you can try to get in touch with yourself and figure out what's going to be best for you and make you happy, especially because you're going to see it trine Jupiter several times. you can call in that creative project, you can call in that joy, you can feel more fulfilled, you can be more creative, you can have more time for romance or children. And I think that if there has been an identity crisis, which you may feel like is kind of going on this month, you can heal that and your appearance will evolve. So self-reflect gently, avoid isolation. I think you're going to come out the other side of this kind of like renewed and with like a different kind of mindset as we're getting into April. Be mindful of like any appearance changes. Like Mercury is going to retrograde conjunct Venus. So you can be feeling like you have to change yourself based off of what other people are telling you, or if other people are kind of being critical, and you can get in your head about it. And like really dramatic aesthetic changes, cutting your hair, you know, big clothing overhauls, like makeup changes, big investments, I would say, don't let that influence you. Like there's no need to do that, because what people are telling you should change or what they're being critical of, you may realize it doesn't really resonate with you. And if you're coming out of a phase like that, now you're kind of getting into a more of alignment with who you really are on the inside. So I love the fact that it's going to conjunct Venus, and I love that it's going to trine Jupiter, because it's very strong for romance, creative projects, as well as children. Good luck, Pisces. Definitely let me know what happens with that retrograde. What happened last year? Definitely leave me a comment. All right, guys. Well, that is this week at a glance. So from February 22nd to March the 1st, that's your astro weather. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Remember that Mercury retrograde is kind of our cosmic pause button for profound healing over the next couple of weeks. I'll be following along to see what happens and see how some of these kind of predictions hit. Stay aligned, and I will see you on the live later this week on Friday for the eclipses. If you want to see more about me and my work, check out my website below at beyondtheveiledtarot.com. You can book a session with me there, and you can also check out my courses. I've also got some transit calendars, some tarot tote bags, and make sure you guys subscribe for my newsletter because I'm getting ready to put out my new apothecary line of products and other things that I'm making, that I'm blending with planetary influences. It's really cool. Candles, baths, and making oils, all kinds of simmer pots, all kinds of stuff. So I'm going to probably be dropping that in like the next month or two. And if you guys want to see that, if you want me to do a video on that, show you some of the products and the things that I'm kind of making in my process, let me know, and maybe I'll post one. And I hope you guys enjoy this next week and the Mercury retrograde. Take care, stay sane, and I'll see you here soon.